How I Found God, a search for God in yourself. When you seek God, you find much more than your salvation and eternal life. You gain freedom, encounter with yourself, and the greatest love in the world. Andréa Maquelviski. You will never understand who you are until you understand who God is. Billy Graham. You will never understand who you are until you understand who God is. Billy Graham. Through this work, Andréa Maquelviski shows that when you decide to enter the path of God, your self-knowledge automatically begins, awakening your conscience even more. God offers full self-knowledge that you won't find anywhere else. The abandonment of your old self and the beginning of a new road in search of the one who has always been, is and will be with you eternally. We just need to awaken and enter the path is awakening. Bon voyage. I dedicate to God and Jesus for inspiring me and being present in my life at all times. To my love and companion Manuel Carlos, my mother Jandira, and my beloved nephews Moteus Yuji, Julia, and Richard, who inspired me to create the book, and to my cat Minga, who was very present during this construction, my family, and to everyone who feels part of it. And to my father Astor Maquelviski Ozi in memoriam. How I Found God is a personal account of the trajectory of the search and encounter with God. However, much more than talking about religion, it is going beyond. To go beyond yourself is to find yourself in God. A search, a path, an encounter, a reunion, and a rebirth. It is the certainty of correct choices, of self-knowledge without makeup, masks, or magic formulas. It is the achievement of walking that leads to the transcendental. That starts with simple everyday choices that will lead you to chaos or raise your level of consciousness, making you understand who you really are and who God is. Resignations, questions, doubts, problems. Everyone knows that this is part of the path. It is the necessary polishing for an encounter with yourself and God. There is no way to escape this, unless you want to close your eyes and let your life pass by. In blank. It is when you and God merge into one heart, free from prejudices, ties, judgments, anything or thought that spoils this union. For God, there is no color or race, nothing that cannot reach him. His merciful heart welcomes all those who desire a sincere encounter with him. This is more than a calling, it is an invitation to love. Introduction. When there are many questions within you, but you have nothing and no one to help you resolve them, then you understand that, at this moment, your journey begins. You don't know where to start, but you know you need to go, so you'll try to do your best. Things happen naturally. You feel some curiosities about certain subjects and end up trying to experiment to see if it matches what is burning inside you. There are many questions, several paths, and, at the same time, a flood of information. So, what next? Which one to follow? Reason or heart? Matter or spiritual? Duality exists on this earthly plane, and, for now, we cannot escape it. All we can do is make choices, at each moment, an important choice, which will shape our destinies. Many things we cannot control in our lives, but some joys and sufferings we can control, and all of this depends on our choices. And the duality between them is conscious and unconscious, good and evil, negative and positive, and so on. You also have the right to ask the necessary questions of life or simply follow the course of it and see what happens. Who is God? What is the history of humanity? Which religion to follow? Who am I? When we decide to seek God, as a consequence, we will also approach everything that concerns him, and anyone who thinks that the search for God is monotonous, old-fashioned, something of ancient people is mistaken. Quite the contrary. It is a courageous and current search, of which, even before finding God, you have some encounters with yourself, and that is just the beginning of this polishing and this encounter. This ends up becoming a life project, in the same way as dreams of building a family, a professional career, or any other desire. It is a construction of your relationship with God. There are people who find God first and then begin an intimate transformation, and there are others who begin a transformation and then find God. See that construction takes place in both. But we also cannot ignore deconstruction before anything happens, which is often necessary, in addition to being beneficial. I believe it is very important, the moment we decide to go in search of something, to cleanse and empty our mind, in some cases, even deconstruct it, to open our conscience and our heart in order to receive and weigh whatever comes our way in a purer form. And so, begin a reconstruction, until you reach the point where you can insert God completely into your life and understand that He is your best friend, Father, your north, your horizon, your ground, and your air, without needing to become neurotic. But all in a very natural way. The search for God is fair, clean, sincere, true, strong, irresistible, surprising, and enchanting, and this strengthens you as a fairer, more sincere warrior, more true, and more all the attributes of this battle. There is indeed a spiritual war going on, and you, as a warrior of God, have the obligation to inform yourself about it, arm yourself, defend yourself, and most importantly, fight. Don't let yourself be overcome by evil. It wants to see you evil. When everything is lost, the first question we ask ourselves when we go looking for something is, where do I start? And a very cliché answer is, from the beginning. You can't go wrong. But what is this beginning? The beginning is what you have in your hands or close to it, because the best way to get to know something or someone, in this case, God and Jesus, is to study, to obtain information. The answer is simple, but accurate. Often, just attending church once a week for an hour, for many people, may not have any effect, because, like everything in life, we need training. And you can do this training yourself, even because, nowadays, with all this ease of access to information, only lay people are those who want it, or perhaps those who are unable to do so. But, with all this ease, there is also a concern about doing the right things, as evil lurks around wanting to show you all the wrong paths so you can get lost and stay lost. And one thing is certain, if you know God and His Word, you will be strengthening yourself with a high percentage. I'm not saying you won't fall, because the enemy is cunning and he will tempt you, but the more you shield yourself, the stronger you will be. Many people have no knowledge and think that the Bible is just for believers, but everything you look for outside, often from other people, advice, examples, is all found in the Bible. And the most interesting thing is that this advice is very current. How many times have I been on the edge of a precipice, opened the Bible, and its words calmed my heart? For example, open the Bible to Proverbs, take a look at the advice, and realize what you have in your hands. Now we have the Bible online. Be curious. The Bible is a great friend, always ready, and only those who read it know how much it strengthens us. Believe me. Luke 11 verses 9 to 10. And I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be open to you. For whoever asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. My mother's family have always been fervent Catholics, who live with the rosary in hand all day and all night. When I was a child, my grandfather used to talk about God and the Bible. He and my mother taught me how to pray, and that made a difference in my life. My father was very diverse. He read the Bible every day. On Wednesdays, we went to a spiritualist meeting. On Sundays, I took my mother to the Catholic Church, and he still found time to talk to Jehovah's Witnesses. And so, I grew up. At 16, the news came that my father had rectal cancer. Then came the revolt of something I didn't understand, and I had no one to share my afflictions with. My mother already had a very busy mind regarding my father. She wasn't going to overload her. One day, I felt that things were getting difficult in my head. I felt alone, with no one to advise me on which direction to take, and I understood that I would need something that would give me strength not to take me away, as my father was going. The disease was aggressive, but my father managed to remain calm and often even joked about everything that was happening to him. He had a certainty in his heart that wouldn't let him shake. Of course, he also didn't want to leave us worse than we were, but I know it was much more than that. My father really had a spiritual structure that didn't let him indulge. He grew his spirituality throughout his life, between mistakes and successes. There were moments when I saw the anguish in his eyes. No one is made of iron, but he was a hero, my hero. So I asked him which religion was right, because the Catholics said that they were right and the others were wrong, and the evangelicals disputed that theirs was right and the others were wrong. My mother, without blinking, said that she was Catholic, and my father, in his calm and wisdom, said that my heart would tell me, but so that I wouldn't worry, as I was still young. The new didn't convince me, and I needed an answer yesterday. He knew that the ready answer would not convince me, and that I would need to search for myself to resolve my doubts. I didn't know what would happen without him. It felt like I was on the edge of a cliff blindfolded, where emptiness took over and I didn't have many options. Then, on December 24th, 1994, he was extremely weak. I lay down next to him, and my eyes deepened into his eyes. I realized that he no longer had any shine, but he gave me a lot of love. My father asked if I wanted to tell him something as he was leaving. I took a deep breath and told him that he wasn't going anywhere, because I was still going to give him a lot of headaches, and that he wouldn't get out of this so easily. My father smiled and my throat stopped. He said that I wasn't going to leave there, and I would be right back. He no longer got up, as his belly was bigger than a 9-month pregnant woman, because, in addition to the colostomy he had had, the cancer had spread to his liver. The body eliminated water with the intention of solving the problem, and there was no way to release this water, so the belly grew, and, when it could no longer breathe, a puncture was made. My father no longer walked. He would run out and go to the yard to cry. I would pull myself together and return to his side, and he would continue to say he was leaving. The doctor said he had about 6 months to live, and he told the doctor he just wanted to make it until Christmas. The rest was profit, and he repeated that to everyone. My father knew how much I loved him. I always wanted to tell him, but I never could. I knelt down next to him that Christmas Eve, ran my hand over his head and said, "Merry Christmas, Dad." My heart tugged at me, so I felt like this was my last chance. I looked into his eyes and said, "I love you, okay? Never forget." He rolled a tear down his face, and, at that moment, of all the others when he could run away, he couldn't. So I cried, and, in that early morning of December 25th, he left, fulfilled his life goal and his wish to die on Christmas Day. Lots of people around, but a void so big that I could hear an echo inside me. It was the loneliest and saddest moment when my spiritual journey really began. The search principle. Even though I was angry and made some wrong choices, spirituality caught my attention. Suddenly, I found myself truly alone, with no one to guide me. So I looked ahead and went in search of my questions. How many won't? There comes a time when you will have to take your own reins and follow your path. I didn't want to wear my mother down with more worries, so I avoided bringing her into my troubles as much as possible. And when you're a wild horse, problems can be bigger than expected, and all you want is not to be lost. I was a wild horse, and my heart was always my guide, but I was also always judged a lot for it. It was easier to point the finger than to say, "Sit here." And a wild horse is generally not afraid of anything and faces everything, and that was the way I found to not give up. I fought battles within myself and often left injured and devastated. Maturity wasn't enough for my own balance. I wasn't prepared for anything that was happening. With me, on the contrary, I was still being prepared for life. The trainer had left, and, ahead of me, there was a long road ahead. I confess that I didn't do very well, until I understood that you are in the middle of a war, and you need much more than just fighting. You have already taken lead from all sides and given it too. How many disappointments, traumas, and tripping did it take to wake up? I really don't know. There were many. My father acted with me in the same way that the character Guido, by Roberto Benigni, acted with his son Giasu, a character by Giorgio Cantarini, in Life is Beautiful. There was a war outside, but he was showing me the beautiful part of life. This is charming for a child, but there wasn't time to tell the rest of the story. The real part, about the reality of life and discovering it on my own, was very painful. But the world turns and everything keeps moving, no one waits for you, and you end up not waiting for anyone. I decided that, no matter how difficult it was, I wanted to always smile, and I did. I read my first spiritual book when I was 19, Naso Lar, by Chico Xavier. That book, at that moment, was an opening of consciousness and the first contact with life after death that I had. That abyss between me and my father had disappeared, so I was able to breathe again, and things began to flow in my spiritual life. For a long time, I moved between religions to try to find my place. I visited churches, attended services to see if my heart was right, but nothing happened. In the beginning, everything related to the mystical part enchanted me. Signs, tarot, runes, clairvoyance, in short, an infinite number of mystical things. Everything related to the occult instigated me, and I ended up immersed in this esoteric world, and I believed that I was getting to know a lot about myself. I was, but not in the true way I wanted to find myself. I needed to find God. That was my true goal, but how? Sometimes, doubts arose and I didn't know if I really had faith. I didn't think so and asked myself if I really believed in God. I always asked this question. I looked at people fervent in God and wanted to feel the same. I couldn't feel it. So, I asked, how do they do it? I went to work at a Catholic theology institution where I met some people who, when they told me about the church, left me disappointed. Those conversations about what people did and did to harm the institution disenchanted me, and so I left the Catholic Church without even knowing its history, beyond the brief Sunday masses and the catechesis I did as a teenager. But at the same time, I didn't abandon it, because whenever there was an open church, I went in and said my prayers. I mixed everything in my head, God with religion. I thought it was one thing. I didn't understand that men were imperfect and made mistakes, and I, in my ignorance, judged them. So my relationship with Cardis's spiritualism began. I learned many things about charity, death, reincarnation. I read books that, at the time, helped me a lot, and it seemed like they had answers for everything. However, the more I learned. But I felt a restlessness deep down, and my heart wasn't complete. Whenever I could, I visited a different church, watched something, and my heart told me whether it was there or not. I didn't miss anything. I went from funeral celebrations to chatting with different tribes. I was always interested in learning as much as I could, as it helped me think and open my mind. In addition to the theoretical part, I also liked to experience things, and it wasn't boring. On the contrary, it was very pleasurable. I met different people, customs, ideas similar to and different from mine, which made me reflect and question everything I was experiencing, greatly expanding my consciousness. We cannot talk about what we do not know, and, to be sure of your attitudes, in addition to seeking information, you need to know what you are talking about, even to be able to give your opinion or say that you do not believe it. So, I ended up settling into Cardism. The occult attracted me in a certain way, and so I came to understand his philosophy and working in charity. It was very gratifying to know that life continued beyond the grave. Because of a lot of research on the internet, I got to know New Era, and it started to catch my attention, offering that feeling of total freedom in which everything is just evolution. I really identified with the fact that philosophy is light and brings a certain peace. Their communications with the world beyond are well-directed, demonstrating a higher level of entity sought, and their messages are receptive, well argued by the spirits of evolution. When I stopped to reflect on my steps, I saw that I had already walked a long way, but my heart was not satisfied with any discovery I had made. People looked at me from the outside and judged me for wanting to know religions and truly find myself. Even my mother told me that I was jumping from one branch to another. But what no one understood was that the only thing that mattered in my life was finding God, and I wouldn't rest until I found Him, no matter how many churches I would pass by, how many people I would talk to about it, until my heart showed me that I truly would have found Him. How will I know the true if I don't know the false? I didn't want to have that false security of having found God and staying quiet in some church, afraid of what others would say. That's not how I work. Seek the truth. Always seek the truth, whatever the cost. I wouldn't fool myself and accept what anyone said to me. I would analyze and reach a conclusion in the most sincere way I could, without deception, without lies, without closing my eyes, because I was looking for a true God. Therefore, it was my obligation to be truthful. I also knew about my mistakes, both those I had made and those I was still making. I knew there would have to be a change, and I was willing to do it, not all at once, because then a sudden and permanent change would be very difficult, but in a natural way, because it was my life that was at stake. I wished to meet a master, a guide, a guru, anything that would help me on the path. But nowadays, people are only concerned about themselves, apart from the charlatanism found everywhere. I thought better of it and decided to make my way alone. My mind has always been very open to understanding, and this would facilitate my performance. I would need to increase my common sense and discernment between religion, God, and people. I started thinking about the things that caught my attention most about religions and philosophies and what they taught me. For example, evangelicals. I think the way they express their fervent faith and praise from the heart, how they talk to God, and the understanding of His response is beautiful. I also like the silent faith of Catholics, and I love their prayers, candles, and the ritual of communion. But what catches my attention most is their story, the beginning of everything. How evil wanted and still wants to end the church, and the way it was abandoned by the faithful over time. Muslims. Their delivery and commitment to God gives me chills. I think the dedication to studying the Quran is very beautiful. Jews, Hebrews. I find it very interesting how they dedicate themselves to studying their Bible, the Torah, their faith, and their prayers at the Western Wall, and my respect for everything they have been through. Truly, a very hard-working and suffering people since Mesopotamia. Buddhism. Your meditation is great. It brings us many reflections. In the same way, your beautiful philosophy, whose respect and wisdom are the balance of everything. Meditation was very important in my life, as it still is. Messianic. They made me see the beautiful, and I understood that it is beyond what you judge between the beautiful and the ugly, the charity of giving a jury eye and the joy of receiving it. His philosophy is also very beautiful. Carticism. He made me see beyond the matter. There I learned that the soul is eternal, that it exists, that there is much more to life than what we see, and I also discovered about charity, humility, Judaeus, Hebreus. Ecom Guido interessant como els se dedicam a estudiar sua Biblia, a Torah, sua fe e suas oracos no muro dos dominicos e meu respeto por tudo o que passaram. Realmente, povo muito battle hater e sofrido desde a Mesopotamia. Budismo. Sua metadeseo a tudo de bom, nos transmuitas reflexos, de mesma forma, sua bella philo, Sophia, cujos respeto e sabedoria são o equilibrio de tudo. Foi muito importante a metadeseo na minha vida, como ainda é. Messianicos. Eles me fizeram enxergar o belo. Eu entendi que a além daquilo que você julga. Treo bonito e o fio, a caridade de ministraram jurai e o alento de o receber. Sua filosofia tam. Bem é muito bela. Carticismo. E ele me fez enxergar além de mate. Ria. Ali eu aprendi que a alma é eterna, que existe muito mais vida além daquilo que enxergamos, e ainda descobri sobre a caridade, humildade, arrogance, about some laws, such as that of cause and effect, and countless other lessons that also refine my spirit. With Hinduism, I learned flexibility of thoughts and worshiping God by burning incense and reciting mantras, in this case, prayers. Everything directed to the God of the Bible and Abraham. New era. It expanded my consciousness, not that I believed everything I read, but I know that there was a great opening of consciousness for something more visionary that would come ahead. And all philosophical and esoteric currents have many things to teach us. Learning always occurs, and it is logical that we have to take stock of everything we have learned to take the most important things with us. It will depend on what you are looking for, whether it is just self-knowledge or God. I will not delve into the descriptions of religions and philosophies because that is not the focus, although they are very interesting. There's nothing wrong with self-knowledge as long as you know where you're going. I absorbed all this knowledge and began to use it in the altar that I built for God in my heart. It was all directed to Him. Every meditation, every praise, every learning. It's like a class. You apply the teaching in the best way possible. What is the best way to practice? Meditation? Who are the best meditation teachers? Learn from them. Once studied and assimilated, you direct this to meditate, for example, a way of connecting to God or giving thanks. In the same way, all other attributes are included. It's like a specialization. Who do you think can best teach you about biblical studies? So learn from those who understand best and direct them to God. This thing about knowing religions happened to me, it doesn't mean it will or has to happen to you. I was committed to finding God, so I really wanted to go through all these experiences to get to know each religion or philosophy. In some, I didn't delve deeper because I didn't consider it necessary. Sometimes little information was enough to move on. Even so, the pieces didn't fit together, and I continued to think I had no faith, even though every step I took was toward Him. It seemed, at times, that I was going in circles, and there was almost no progression, but the most interesting thing about all this is that I had a goal, and it was Him, God. And so I understood that religion was not God. It was my first apprenticeship. One day, I read it on the internet. I don't know if it applies at all. That the first 40 years was learning, after that, understanding. So, I realized that everything you go through, at the time, you may not understand, or you may not even realize it. It doesn't matter at that moment, but later, understanding comes, and the only thing you think is, thank you, my God, for everything I experienced, because everything I went through led me to the Lord. I also knew that everything I was going through was part of the path, but the anxiety and fear of being on the wrong path and taking too long on it bothered me. I was aware that my journey would be long, due to the fact that the desire for questions and the feelings went beyond an acceptance of because yes, or that I could catch the tram walking and not understand where it came from and where to go. He will, only a vague and momentary satisfaction, not knowing the time to stop in these causes. Example. Suddenly, you identify with some philosophy, you think what it presents is valid, but you don't go in depth to find out its ideology, who it really follows, if it is right. So, you park there and stay for a good few years. Maybe you discover by chance what it all really means, or maybe you never know. Some philosophies may say that they follow Jesus, but in reality, they created another Jesus, because what they follow is different from what Jesus was and therefore preached caution. It's like reading a contract. Sometimes it can be boring, but it's extremely necessary. And I needed more. I needed fervent, rational faith and true understanding. That's right, combining faith with rationality. Whoever said this is impossible certainly does not know the infinity of all things. In the limited mind, nothing can be seen beyond tangible things. We believe that, in everything in life, there is a balance, the visible and the invisible too. Otherwise, it would be difficult to even believe in air, electricity, sound. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but that every step would be worth it, and nothing would be lost, but everything would be a lesson. Collecting information. With a lot of information gathered, I understood that I had to develop a relationship with God. After all, it is difficult to love someone we still think we don't know, especially because they always mention that God would be far from us, up there in heaven and, most of the time, in church. I always thought about God, but I thought he was too busy to worry about me, because my problems, compared to other people's problems, were nothing. And so I thought for a long time. I was ashamed to ask for something, when there were people dying who needed your attention much more. I have always looked at nature, living beings, even the universe itself. I saw God's magic and asked myself, how could he be so perfect? I could see his signature on everything, so I thought a lot about him and included him in my daily moments. In fact, I have always dated God from a distance, as if you desire something that seems unattainable to you. It was so crazy, because I believed that he existed. I admired him, as well as his creations, but I thought I had no faith and put all of that in checkmate at the same time. It was all very confusing. But later, I understood that it was still very raw in terms of both personal and spiritual understanding. Therein lies the importance of not giving up on our dreams. Sometimes we are not prepared to understand at that moment. So, I started looking for God in everything. I didn't feel like a fanatic, even because it was something silent and natural. The search was silent and solitary, but those closest to me knew my favorite subjects. I needed to create a relationship with him, and what better way to start than including him in my daily life, the same way you do with a friend. And little by little, this introduction started to work. I started to expand our ties, and then a relationship was created. Sometimes I caught myself smiling, thinking that if someone saw me talking to myself, they would call me crazy. The search continued. I wanted to find something that would make my heart beat, that would complete what I was building with God. Generally, people have a tendency to think that the answers are far away, or that it is something miraculous. It is difficult to accept that the answer may be simple and that it has always been there. As John Lennon said, I have been everywhere and only found myself in myself. It's more or less that. But before he found himself, he had to go searching, and only then did he find himself. It's important to come out of the cocoon, get to know each other. But what I think is really crazy is doing all these things and suddenly discovering God. But only those who made a conscious search or gained consciousness at some point along the way get this kind of response from our friend John. How many people go through life without even having admired it? If asked, are you aware of something? Aware of your own existence? There are countless. We ourselves, how many things in this life are we unconscious about? And maybe we always will be. And the only thing I see increasing is people's arrogance. It's all too much. They know too much. They work too much. They talk too much. A lot of intelligence and little wisdom, and when you look inside them, there is an abyss that they believe is infinite, dark and cold. They are filled with momentary sensations and, on bright days, They do not prepare for dark days. I see people laughing at ugly or badly dressed people or because they speak wrong and don't mix with anyone, feeling better than others, and then they fight and fight for causes and cry because there is prejudice against your children or they are not accepted. Or there is a problem. I'm giving this example, but it could be any other example, because people fight for ideals, but they don't see that they are hurting other people in some way. There's no point asking for respect if you yourself don't respect others, just because your problem isn't the same as someone else's doesn't mean the other person doesn't have a problem. Where are the coherence and empathy in all of this? And this is nothing more than self-evaluation, knowing yourself, becoming aware. People still don't understand that there is no one better than anyone else. You may be richer, or more intelligent, or poorer, but this is all momentary. The truth is just one. We all need to reach the same goal, and if it isn't yours right now, it's just a matter of time. And you will ask me, okay, but what does this have to do with my search for God? All. It has everything. Because the importance of being in the present is great. You need to be aware of everything, because, at all times, you make choices, and it is these choices that will take you to the right place or not. It may seem silly, especially when talking about everyday situations, like picking up the wrong change and not saying anything. It's not about reading the best books, but about practicing the simplest lessons. See, every day, life offers you opportunities to become a better human being or not. It's your choices. They say a lot about you, what you think, where you're going, and so on. I myself, on this journey, made choices that led me into chaos, but the learning is strong, and after the lesson comes understanding, and that is what takes you back to the right path. Then other stories come to confirm whether you learned the previous lesson well or not. Making mistakes is part of the path, and once you've made a mistake, there's no point in paralyzing yourself and blaming yourself for the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what your mistake is, as long as you regret it, and the way to show regret is by changing your attitudes so as not to fall into the same holes. Everyone knows how wrong attitudes consume our hearts. And again, other very difficult choices came, which, if I continued, would lead me to chaos too, as well as transforming me into a person very far from who I am today. And I don't regret anything, because everything I went through helped me become who I am today. Every situation, every mistake, every success. I don't want to say that I'm a saint. I'm far from that. But I know that I'm very happy on the path of my evolution. It was and is a lonely internal walk, and I always chose to take one more step. It is difficult to know the level of evolution of each person. Anyone who thinks we can point the finger and say that so-and-so is more evolved than so-and-so is wrong. This is not a bank account that you can pull the balance from. Sometimes that hillbilly man with torn clothes can be more evolved than a guru or a believer who goes to church every day. But that's not my concern. I care about knowing if I'm on the right path, at least trying to make the right choice. But can we know if we are on the right path? Of course it can. If you don't want to make mistakes, put your feet on the ground and give reason to the facts. You will succeed. The first thing you have to do is strip yourself of prejudices, pride, anger, inflexibility, arrogance, pride. Open your heart to God and be careful where you step. Not that you can't walk, but we need to be careful. Therefore, a well-refined common sense is very important, but this often does not save us from falling into some holes. And being aware that this is part of the path already advances one side, not forgetting that, generally. It is necessary to know the false to know what is really true. One of the difficulties I see nowadays is accepting something that goes against what we think. For example, just because you don't like a rule doesn't mean it will stop being a rule or no longer exist for you. It will always be a rule, so you better try your best to deal with it well and, above all, respect it. But most people don't want to face it and resolve the situation, so you may not close cycles. Remember the duality of choice? When you decide to simply be honest with yourself and fight your own sabotage, everything starts to clear up. Destroying or at least inhibiting the ego from commanding you makes all the difference. Believe me, it did it for me, and I have to say, it wasn't and isn't an easy fight, but the will to win has to be greater. Inflexibility is also very harmful. It's more or less like this. You know when a friend asks you to go to a party and you don't want to go, but he insists a lot. He insists so much that it starts to get boring. And you insist that you don't want to go, but in the end, he wins, and you end up going grumbling but going, and suddenly you realize that this was the party of your life. We need to accept life more, the things it offers us, and by being more flexible, you end up bringing more opportunities to your life. Life is like that. It is always inviting you to parties, and often, our inflexibility and being closed off from the world prevent us from finding the party of our life. And what to do with all this? Easy is to start giving new meaning to things in our lives, recycling, deconstructing, taking something and looking at it with different eyes, from another angle. I say this is easy because I started playing with this in my life, looking differently at the same things I always looked at. A very good film, which I looked at with different eyes and helped me a lot, was Yes, Sir, with Jim Carrey, mainly in terms of inflexibility, but I directed all of this towards spirituality. I started by testing my clothes. I always wore the same pants with the same blouses, skirts, shoes, so I started changing. It seems like it's nothing, but it gave a new energy. It started to make sense. I loved. Then I went for the food. I started mixing things that I had never mixed before, because people say you can't eat pasta and beans, for example. I loved. I dared to try different and exotic foods. I loved. Some not, I confess, but it was worth the learning. It may not seem like it, but it gives movement to your life. And when you start to give new meaning to some things, you automatically start to look at others differently. That's the advantage of being flexible. It's being open to new things, having the power to decide. The only people who don't learn anything don't change their minds. You only know good wine after experiencing bad wine. And so, you collect important information for a conscious search. Finding God is not simply deciding to attend church on Sundays, listening to representatives of the church or philosophy speak for a little hour and going home with the false feeling of duty accomplished. Remember building a relationship with God? And that, first, prepare for this relationship. And what would this preparation be? This preparation is for you to cleanse your soul, your mind, your heart, doing some deconstructions, forgiving people and forgiving yourself, asking yourself, who are you without money? Who are you without your profession? Finally, cleaning your house so you can welcome Him, because the most important thing is to open your heart to God. Do a meditation reviewing your concepts and what you think about your spiritual future. After you get to know each other, a relationship will be created. You will know God's story and present yourself before Him, telling Him who you are. I know you will say, but if He is God, He knows who I am. Relax, just enjoy it. The search for God has to be loving and, why not, pleasurable? It is important for God that we verbalize, and by doing this you also end up getting to know yourself better. Another very important thing is knowing the Word. If you know her, no one will deceive you. Your communion with God will be on another level. The most important thing that happened in my life was knowing the Bible and our history, and a little about the history of God and Jesus. Be on the way. Truly, the world is in chaos. Man is very irrational, and we are living in an emotional ice age. And then someone asks, what about God? Isn't He seeing all this? If He really exists, why doesn't He do anything? It is. Yes, You see? But if you're asking that, you're definitely not on the path. I'm sorry, but you're not. They went to look for Pastor Billy Graham because Billy Graham, advisor to the federal Senate at the White House, the reference pastor, they went to ask Billy Graham how God allows something like this. Where was God? Could he not have seen what was happening to us? A Christian country? Hospitalized with pneumonia, Billy Graham cannot go down to the hospital lobby, so he guides his daughter. She goes down, and the first question they asked her was, "Where was God when the towers fell?" To the journalist, she cited 15 items. "I will remember some," she said. God was in the same place he was when we removed religious teaching in schools. God was in the same place he was when we asked him to leave our lives. God was in the same place he was when we released drugs, and now we want to know, where is he? Be careful with his decisions. What is your degree of understanding about God and Jesus? 5. He only heard about God and Jesus from some people who think they understand, and thus created his opinion about them, and that is enough. 4. He watched the story of the Passion of Christ at Christmas and believes that he does not need more information to have a conception of God and Jesus. 3. He joined some philosophy, read 500 books, never read the Bible. Is he sure he knows God and Jesus? Believes in a God and Jesus different from the Bible. Some people refute this saying it's a lie. But they don't give a damn the trouble of truly contesting why they don't take the trouble to read the Bible, and thus continue to believe in illusions, or they remove Jesus from the Bible and mold him in the way that pleases others, and are sure that they know everything about God and Jesus. 2. Attends a church, only reads verses from the Bible to solve his emotional or material problems, remembers Jesus, but doesn't know for sure who he is. 1. Seek the truth first. Even if it destroys some illusions created, read and study the Bible. Know that reading it once is not enough. Don't let yourself be fooled by theories and or philosophies created by other people. The understanding about God and Jesus is very sober. He goes deeply into his research. He can clearly understand what God and Jesus want from human beings, and he knows how they act, without masking reality nor getting indignant. Managing to change what needs to be changed. After discovering the truth, what is your degree of understanding about religion and or philosophy? 5. Believes that religion does not lead to God. 4. Believes that all religions and or philosophies are good and lead to God. 3. Believe that your religion is correct and others are wrong. 2. Someone suggested or was born into religion and or philosophy, arrived without knowledge, started practicing the rituals and continues to this day, but does not know its foundations, reads what others suggest, and does not know the true history of religions. 1. Go to the heart of the story, impartially, do research, seek the truth, manage to eliminate any and all fantasies about religion and or philosophy, and find your place, being sure of Jesus' legacy. And what comes next after that, it is just misinformation, separation, and destruction of Christianity. When you are aimless, with a huge void inside you, then you think, what a dull life, nothing sometimes makes sense, I just have problems and many of them I don't even know how to solve, I don't have enough money, or I even have enough money. And an infinity of lamentations that devastate you inside, often with the desire to end your own life, and many even end it. I know, I've been there too. I just didn't end my life because my knowledge about death didn't allow me to. I thought it wouldn't be worth it. The suffering as a result of this would be much worse. Most likely, if she had not known God, it would have ended with her. So, I decided to wait for the wave to pass, and, believe me, the wave passes. And when you look back, you have two thoughts. I can't believe I was going to kill myself over this, and I feel so empowered. Then, You discover that without God there is no way, and if you knew Him, you would know that, much more than taking care of us, He is trying to communicate all the time, and you simply don't see it. But what about love for others? So, with all these tricks that life throws at us and all this evolution and technology happening in our lives, it's hard to remember what's next, right? Someone thinks, we can only love our family, and that is already a good size. Sometimes, not everyone in the family can love each other, or I only love others if they are like me or on the same level. I love them, but I don't mix in. To what extent are we being honest and realistic about loving others? People limit themselves in love, as if love were something finite. He is not. We love, and we will always love, again and again and again. One, because it doesn't depend on our will, and thankfully it doesn't depend on that, because otherwise we would be toast. Or not. LOL. And another, if this were not the case, our mission on Earth would not be complete, or would not even exist. People close themselves in circles. First, my family, then others. Does it really have to be like this? Is this fair? But who are we to judge, right? But we are selfish, we are flawed. If something bad is going to happen, let it be with someone else, that be it from the other, with the other's child. Not that we are wrong in wishing the best and all the best for us and our loved ones, but let's look at the other as if he were ours. Even because he is. This may not make sense to you yet. Did you understand? When you look at the other as one of your own, you also start to wish good for them, and instead of wishing that evil takes the other's child and not yours, you begin to wish that evil takes neither yours nor yours, that of the other, since everyone would lose. This becomes collective thinking. Can you imagine if we thought like this about all other matters in our lives? Then you tell me, but that's a big illusion. And I tell you, no, that's a big dream. And dreams can come true, no matter the weather. This was Jesus' dream, and today it is mine too. And tomorrow it could be yours. If every day someone takes this dream for themselves, it will expand, and perhaps, even if it takes billions of days, the dream will come true. That's how it is. Everyone needs to do their part. How long will we be unconscious? How long will we hurt our brothers? How long will we be hurt? In the threefold law used in Wicca, it says, everything you do will return to you in this life multiplied by 3. I felt this pain on my skin. I don't know if it was for 3, but it felt like 10. It takes a lot of courage to face yourself and face your own self, freeing yourself from the ego and accepting life as it presents itself. Something very deep and true that needs to go through to enter the path of God. You know you are on the path when you realize that everything around you is in chaos, and inside you, there is a great certainty that this will pass, even if it ends with some result that you don't want. Even so, you know that everything will be fine. You know you're on the path when the meaningless questions you had about God today have answers that make perfect sense. You know you are on the path when peace invades your being and you become aware of eternity. You know you're on the path when all the answer is love. You are on the path when you realize that God, in His eternal mercy, loves us and wants to save us. You are on the path when you realize that we are all one, and the other also affects me as I affect him, successively. You are on your way when you realize your misery and discover that Earth is definitely not your place. Being on the path is something conscious, rational, even though it may not seem like it, but it is. Being on the path is something liberating. Only those who go through it are sure of that. Being on the path is your being polishing itself every day to transform into pure essence. It's as if you were wearing many layers of clothes and were consciously taking them off one by one, until you felt naked with everything you were. But being on the path doesn't mean you stop living. Of course. But contrary to what many people think, life gets more colorful. It does. Automatically, everything is given new meaning, and you begin to Accumulate sensations that you had stopped feeling for a long time, such as peace, balance, joy, security, and certainty in tomorrow. It's beautiful, isn't it? And this is real. God is this feeling, because God is pure love, a living source. The certainty that you are not alone and nothing has ended or will end. How hard it is to believe that everything ends with death. Becoming an empty life, dull, without objectives, without understanding through learning and suffering, creating an abyss between you, yourself, and God. Nothing makes sense. How many people take their own lives because of these feelings? Without even giving God a chance to enter your life and change everything, because He transforms. Oh, transforms. Do you see how important our analyses of arrogance and inflexibility are? Sometimes a person thinks they have tried everything. Besides not having tried, he doesn't accept it. For you to understand about God, you need to have an open heart, without judgment. Arrogance won't get you anywhere, and inflexibility won't let you go anywhere. And when arrogance blinds, it mistreats. God is a pure, supreme, merciful being, and He wants our best. He does not demand our perfection, because we cannot offer what we do not have or are, but we can give Him our best. And as time passes, naturally, you come to understand what He wants from you. I believe that the first step to take is to get rid of all the feelings that paralyze you, all the thoughts that prevent you from making a choice that will make a difference in your life. We need to stop throwing ourselves into the ashes, beating ourselves up, face the problem and solve it. It's time. For some people, it seems to be easier. They accept Jesus and, from that moment on, everything happens differently in their lives. But, in reality, if they reach this moment of acceptance, they certainly had a previous history, a path to follow. There are two ways to enter the path. The first is to accept Jesus, go in search of knowledge and change the story of your life, or else seek knowledge, and then decide whether to accept Jesus or not. Accepting Jesus or not is a decision that every human being will face at some point in their life. It is not something that will go unnoticed in anyone's life. Perhaps this questioning comes at critical moments, such as a personal illness or that of someone close to you, calamitous situations of both disasters and materials, or simply by your own choice. In these cases, the person is usually touched in the heart, but they can also ignore it. And it usually happens at a moment when you are 100% in the now, like a reality check. But we will always come across these questions and simply ignore them. It won't solve anyone's life. Immediate people are easier to ignore because they cannot visualize the future. Then someone asks, what future? Eternity, yes itself, eternity. For an atheist, when you die, everything ends. For a Buddhist, death is like changing an endless cycle of changes, being able to reincarnate as human beings or animals, or in other places other than Earth. For Hinduism, death is a passage to a new dimension until reincarnation again. For spiritualism, reincarnation is a necessity to evolve in order to go through tests and move forward on the evolutionary path, in an infinite repetition between dying and being reborn. The beliefs of evangelicals are similar to Catholicism. The difference is that evangelicals do not believe in the existence of purgatory. For them, people remain asleep until the moment of the final judgment, in which each person is judged and has their destiny decided by God, heaven or hell. In Islam, after death, the soul is kept waiting for the final judgment. In Judaism, some believe in reincarnation and others in resurrection. In Catholicism, everyone believes in the resurrection, which will happen after the final judgment, in which they will go to heaven or hell. Some people can go through purgatory for the remission of their sins and only then go to heaven. And you? What is your view on death? Even for you to give up on God and Jesus, you need to be sure of what you are doing. Your knowledge has to go beyond what someone said. It doesn't matter if it's a celebrity, a scientist, or an expert on the subject. You have to research it yourself and draw your own conclusions. You may not understand at this moment, but know that this is the most important decision of your life, so I advise you to be careful. I think almost everyone has heard in their life, "Oh, if only I had listened to my mother or my father." It's more or less there. In fact, they want to remove the importance of God from our lives, trivialize those who believe in Him, taking away all the merit of the Creator and Father of all creation. They people sick with evil say that religion is strategic, but, in fact, they are the strategists moving us away from God's protection and leaving us weakened, causing anything to try to fill the emptiness in our hearts. And so, humanity continues to walk, feeding on ephemeral pleasures, useless information that leads nowhere. Not that these pleasures are not good. They are, but first you fill your heart with that is true, then you can have fun in a conscious and non-manipulated way. The only thing that fills the emptiness in our hearts is truly God. It's not just me who says this, but many people who have gone through depression and other illnesses, misfortunes, great emptiness, and when finally, after reluctantly, they gave themselves into the arms of Jesus. I can say that I cured my depression with Jesus. Only those who truly have God in their hearts know how real this is. But until then, how many didn't die? Did they get sick and not accept the solution? How many people commit suicide without even giving themselves the opportunity? Evil is in action, it lurks, waiting for someone to hesitate before it can act. And someone will ask, and God? Is good doing nothing? Of course, yes. God is tireless, tirelessly good, tirelessly merciful, and He is by our side all the time. And if you knew His story, you would know why we went through so much misfortune, and you wouldn't blame Him. On the contrary, you would ask for forgiveness. Good works without ceasing. But there is something that God respects a lot, and that the other side does not know what it means: our free will. Free will is something very important that you always have to keep in mind. It is the deciding factor when you make decisions, and we do this every day, from the moment we wake up. The problem is that we often take a long time in situations that we should get through more quickly. It seems that we are hypnotized until something awakens us so that we can give a new impulse. People have to understand that we are in a spiritual battle between good and evil. This is a reality. You know those two little angels that everyone says we have? This is also real, apart from one who is not a little angel, and we cannot say that he is a devil, because, depending on the situation, he is a devil. But our choices end up being summed up between good and evil. You can do a test yourself, and when you make a choice, instead of focusing on it, think, is this for good or for bad? You will realize that this situation exists and become aware of it from that moment on. Perhaps if people chose between good and evil at the time of each choice, it would be easier to choose, and we would be much more aware of our actions, something that today goes largely unnoticed, as there is a great unconsciousness among human beings, and that is a fact. Now it is clear how this paradox exists. It's a fact. There is a battle between good and evil, and you need to choose which side you want to stay on. I'm not even saying that you need to stay by Jesus' side, because we already know that free will exists. Feel free to choose. We are free to choose which side we want to be on, identify, and listen to. It's just not worth complaining about God, as we are responsible for our attitudes, and the Lord, if we let Him, will help us more. In the past, everything was passed on by word of mouth. Stories were passed down from generation to generation, something very precious and emotionally charged. This was our heritage, the values that our ancestors handed down to us, to continue what they believed to be true. I want you to be strong with things you read and even get angry with. But if that happens, simply reflect and don't give up. This is all part of the path, and I want you to be clear that we often find ourselves disorganized, lost, upset, and confused. There is a huge confusion between freedom and prison mental deception, and anyone who thinks that being ruled means being arrested, manipulated, and imprisoned is seriously mistaken. To be with God, you have to follow rules. He has rules, just like in your parents' house, like in any company, like anywhere they exist, but you are not obliged to follow them. Remember the free will? However, there are also laws for those who cheat the system of rules. Punishments, fines, punishments, convictions, sentences, penances, and so on, which are nothing more than rules. No matter how hard you try, it's difficult to escape them. Laws were not created for those who follow the rules, precisely for those who do not follow them. I'll give an example. There is a radar that finds anyone who exceeds 110. If you know that your safe limit is 100 and that going beyond that could have serious consequences, then respect the rule and even forget about it. In fact, you won't even bother with the radar, because it's not there for you. Who cares about him? The one who doesn't accept the rules. Oh, but is it all like that? That sounds really boring. Yeah, it's all like that. At first, it may seem boring, but then it becomes routine. The most enjoyable thing is the feeling that, in addition to closing cycles, this only makes you stronger. I remember situations I'd been through in which I don't know where I got the strength to decide on the right path, which brought me some frustrations and even disappointments, and ended in depression. After all this, today I look with pride at my decisions and the understanding of why each thing happened. But I also look back and see my wrong decisions, how painful it was, and how much it caused all of this. Reflecting on these two types of decisions, there is no doubt that it can be difficult, very difficult, extremely difficult, almost impossible or apparently impossible to make the correct decision. You may think you're going to die, go into depression, lose your friends, because we don't lose true friends, your family, your possessions. However, it's worth it. You can be sure that everything will pass. No one will take away from you the feeling of dignity, of empowerment, of respect for yourself. It's like winning a trophy, but an imaginary trophy. Because making the right decisions is everyone's obligation, but the happiness that this all represents is extraordinary. Between you and God. All our attitudes, from the simplest to the most complex, are between each person and God, regardless of whether someone is looking or not, and you will be charged for each one of them, no matter how much time passes. Sometimes you can go through something bad and ask yourself, what did I do to be going through this? Actually, the question is right, you're just not remembering the act itself. Why? Because you often cause things unconsciously and then don't realize that many of the things you receive are harvests of what you sowed. For example, you laugh evilly at people. You do it unconsciously and you forget the attitude you had. Time passes and, up ahead, someone laughs at you and that ruins your day. You are not aware that whoever plants, reaps, and you have no idea that you are going through this because you did it too and ruined someone's day. Sometimes, the harvest is not even similar to the act you took, but most of the time, when you are aware, you can understand the message. It is logical that many things we do not plant. There is also an evil that lurks to harm us, and we need to fight against it. We are bombarded all the time, and Jesus talked about what we would go through. If you study his teachings, in addition to understanding all of this, you will know how to deal with any situation. And this is all between you and God, and, as our dear Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, people are often self-centered, illogical, and unwise. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of being selfish and self-interested. Be kind, just like that. If you are a winner, you will have some false friends and true enemies. Win, just like that. If you are honest and frank, people may deceive you. Be honest and frank anyway. If you have peace and are happy, people may feel jealous. Be happy, just like that. The good you do today may be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best of you, but it may never be enough. Give the best you have anyway. You see, in the end it is between you and God, and not between you and men. It never was and never will be between us and men, but between each person and God. What Mother Teresa says is extraordinary and true. Everything that happens in your life is between you and God. It has never been with others. I believe that. Only with this knowledge, there can be a change in attitudes on our part, and these actions are exercises of faith, patience, love for others, and, best of all, inner peace. Simplicity has to be part of our lives. God lives in simple things. Humility is a big step in the self-centered and arrogant life we navigate. Everything has and respects an order in the universe. There are rules. What you see had or has an order to happen, from the manufacturing of a product to the rotation of the earth. Why then do many people complain about following rules towards God? To tell the truth, anyone who doesn't like rules and doesn't follow them is Satan. For him, everything can be done, and there are no limits. But this is what he shows, because even the devil has his rules. Crooked rules, but rules. I remembered a joke that I don't know the author of, which talks about a man who died and went to heaven. He was feeling a little bored and asked St. Peter that he wanted to see hell. St. Peter said, "But, my son, are you sure? There is no place for you." "No, St. Peter, I want it." Arriving in hell, he was welcomed by several little devils, lots of parties and excitement. Returning to heaven again, after a few days, boredom returned. He went to talk to St. Peter and said he wanted to go back and stay permanently in hell. Then St. Peter said, "All right, my son, if that's what you want, but know that there will be no return." Arriving in hell, he saw everything different, some rubble, distressed people, a cauldron with people crying inside, and the devil came to welcome him. Then the man asked, but, why is everything different? Where are the little devils? And the parties? Soon, the happy devil replied, "Tourism is tourism. Housing is something else. Rules are rules in everything. They exist, good or bad, but they exist. If someone says it doesn't exist, be suspicious." And that's how it is. For example, when you start drinking socially, it's really cool, but you end up drinking in the middle of the week. It's still really cool, but you end up not even realizing it, and you're drinking daily, so your body starts to complain and you don't realize. Your family complains and you still don't realize it, and, before you know it, you're already drinking. It no longer has the effect of making you happy as when you drank socially. It makes you sad and you still don't realize it. The only thing it really does at that moment is anesthetize your body, making it get worse and worse. And so it is with cigarettes and any other addiction that we human beings enjoy. It's like a priest once said to me, "Have you ever seen someone sinning and suffering?" Maybe not at the time, but depending on the level of consciousness, yes. So, reflect and see who you are targeting each day and moment in which you take action. Think about when you are going to take action and imagine a forked road in front of you. On one side, good, and on the other, evil, and make your choice, remembering that, one day, we will reach the end of this road, and who will we want to meet? We need to stop being short-sighted and be able to see, or at least visualize, the future. Of course, we don't know what it will be like, but we have a preview of the steps we have taken. So, I think it's interesting to start paying attention if you don't want to be caught by surprise. I once read on the internet, if God really exists, do you have any idea that this is the most important thing in our lives? I found this reflection so interesting because, in truth, we are not aware of this, without generalizing, of course. I know that thousands have it, but at the time, I didn't have it either. I knew it was important, but not how important. Can you see the immensity that this reflection reaches? I will mention some reflections that I had. All our needs, from the basic to the most complex, will change priority. Let's look at our neighbors differently. We will look at money differently. All pride, arrogance, resentment, revenge, etc. falls to the ground. We will choose our conscious and zealous paths. We will have great joy in living. Our habits, customs, and beliefs will change. All our voids will be filled. We will look at death differently. We will be sure of eternity. This is all just the beginning. I believe you will think of many others. But this is all a reality for those who believe in God. These are the first fruits of the sensations and certainties we feel. Living a life with God is very different from living a life alone, you for yourself, but free will. Remember that? To live a life with God, you don't need to be a monk as many people imagine. Of course, as you gain knowledge and intimacy with Him, you yourself will feel other types of needs, but all in a very natural way. A radical change may work for some, if you are that type, but for others, a transformation like this would not be able to consolidate what really needs to be changed, and often, if it is not according to each person's time, some people end up giving up. It was spread by evil, with the idea that this thing of talking and seeking God is boring. Surely, Satan released fake news and it worked. Another piece of fake news he released was that religion is not discussed. It worked so well that no one even argues. But the problem wasn't even the discussion, because I even understand people not talking about religion. Everyone has their own opinion, which led people to understand that it's not to talk about God either. But they just didn't understand that God and religion are two very different things. So, folks, it's okay to talk about God. Therefore, it is very important that each person knows enough about themselves to make the right choice. It is very important to find God and a religion if you want. Not that you can't have God wherever you want. In our hearts, we possess Him all the time. We just need to be careful because some people think that belief in God is like self-service. You assemble God however you want. Mainly the word in the Bible that you read. If it agrees with what you think, well, if not, it's out of your notebook. That's not how it works. It's not up to you to choose. We can't approach it in a pretentious, predefined, individual, or biased way. God doesn't work like that. As much as we don't accept it, the truth often hurts. The medicine is bitter, and the truth He left for everyone. Do you remember the rules? The word religion comes from Latin and means religare, to reconnect with God, and it does have its importance. We can choose where we feel best, the form of cults and indoctrinations of each one. But see, this has a serious factor, as there are many religions and philosophies, and you will have to decide for yourself where you want to go. Here on these pages, I leave my story of how I found God, and I will be as truthful as possible when telling my experiences and studies. I need to be as faithful and true to myself as possible, not because of anything or anyone, but because I chose to live this way. I chose God. You need to define which God you want to find. Yes, there are many. They say that God is one for everyone, and He is. God is Lord of everyone. It was He who created humanity. But what about you? Which God is choosing? The God of creation in the Bible? Because the God of the Bible is not the same as the God of Indians, Buddhists, etc. They chose different gods, and that is a reality. Even so, God does not stop being Father to anyone. It's all very nice to say that God is the same for everyone. I also believe that way, but in reality, that is not true. God chooses human beings, but not every human being chooses God. That is the difference. You can believe in Shiva, one of the supreme gods of Hinduism. Do you agree that Shiva is not the same God as the Bible? His stories are completely different. Therefore, not all gods are the same God. Hindus do not want to follow the God of Moses They want to worship several gods following the sacred texts of the Vedas or other writings. Not that this has any problem, it is each person's choice, free will. But if this still gives you doubts, do some research and you will find your answers. There are people who believe in a higher intelligence as something that is not part of their everyday life. They simply believe in something inanimate. God is a superior intelligence, but this person wants to believe in this intelligence and not in the living God of the Bible. There are doctrines that say they follow Jesus, but believe in evolution and not in creation, conflicting with the Bible, not bringing coherence. I understood this after much questioning. God wants to be Lord of everyone, but not everyone wants him as God. Hence the importance of research. Don't be fooled. God has his rules and his history. If you study the Bible, you will understand. When Jesus came into the world, he was very clear. John 14 verse 6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. This phrase is the best, so when you reveal it, the truth comes out, and other things no longer have priority. You know? Just with this sentence you already eliminate many doubts. For example, Jesus says that only those who pass through him can reach the Father. He was very clear about this. Jesus said that he is the way. He did not say that all paths lead to God. This is very serious. I need to follow a path, but I will choose the path where Jesus is present, because he said that you can only reach God through him. So, I dismiss religions in which there is no Jesus in their context, no matter how beautiful your philosophy is. I research what Jesus means for some philosophies that interest me and whether they see Jesus as just another prophet or as another evolved spirit, taking away his authority as the only begotten Son of God and our Savior. Not being consistent with the story of Jesus, I also dispense. This is my opinion, not disparaging any religion. If Jesus says that he is the truth, everything, but everything he says, I will believe without a doubt, because I have accepted him from my heart. Life, because he proved that there is life after death, and it wasn't just words. He was crucified and rose again. When he talks about life after death, he says resurrection, not reincarnation. He was also very clear on this. And this is the good news that only Jesus brought to us. Life after death, eternal life. This Bible verse made all the difference in my life, and, for the first time, I felt something different in my heart, an awakening, a different movement, a light at the end of the tunnel. In fact, everyone wants to see God in their own way, but that doesn't work. God has personality too. It's like reading a manual. It's there, at your fingertips, like a cake recipe. You just have to read it and follow it. One thing is true. You have nothing to. If you lose by reading this manual, quite the opposite. You can only gain by finding God. If suddenly you can't find anything, or your time hasn't come, or you haven't done your homework properly, let's say you might waste your time, but you certainly haven't reached the end and become a better human being. Because there is no one who goes through Jesus and does not become a better human being. But we waste time on so many things, right? That doesn't add anything to us. For example, have you ever counted how much time you waste on social media looking at photos? And what did this action bring understanding to you as a human being? I'm not judging. I want to make you reflect on something bigger. Okay, it's pleasurable, but believe me, you have no idea what a pleasure it is when you find God and your mind expands. But even so, if in your search you don't find Jesus, be sure of one thing. You haven't reached the point. And then, don't give up. Don't ever give up. If you're reading this today, it's because I didn't give up either. Know that you won't regret it. God has his own characteristics, rules, personality. After all, he is an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, and merciful being, not what we want him to be. I asked people a few times how they imagine God, and some said that he is a being of light. others that he was a bearded old man with a staff in his hand. How do you imagine God? Revelation 22 verse 13, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. God has his own rules, and whoever chooses to follow his path will have to submit. After all, if they don't submit to him, it will be to someone else. Anyone who doesn't like rules is Satan. Even so, he also has his rules. This anything goes thing is a deception, a trap. But as Satan does not play fair, the rules can be changed for his good. God wrote our story, the one that we are allowed to know. We do not realize that story. Imagine if he said everything at once. We are not prepared. We cannot properly understand what he left. And so, more and more religions appear for all tastes. In short, this is a reality and can leave us confused, especially if we are laymen. We become easy prey, but we cannot worry. We must be questioning and believe in God, in the living God of the Bible. As time passes, more religions are born, and thus, confused, we move further away from the truth. This is all a delicate issue that we need to be very careful about when making a choice. I did some in my life, but, thank God, I was questioning, because maybe I would still be stuck in the same place, accepting everything others said. I'm a grateful person. I know everything I learned. I had to go through everything to be here. I am very grateful for every lesson, but God was waiting for me. I couldn't stop. I went in search of the true God to follow, and was impressed with everything that was presented to me. I have seen religions that give a lot of lightness. Their philosophies are very seductive. But, however, there is an emptiness, a feeling of not belonging, nothing very concrete. They didn't convince me. My heart, in truth, did not rejoice. The phrase Jesus said kept ringing in my head. John 8 verse 32, and they will know the truth, and the truth will set them free. I believed those words and confidently followed. The truth. I've always been a mystical person. This made me feel like a free, New Age, Aquarian person. And I didn't like anything that could make me feel trapped, but I was determined to find God, no matter what. So my search continued. A lot of learning ahead. I felt everything was going very well, despite experiencing some embarrassing moments. I then decided to follow the God of the Holy Scriptures, the Father of Jesus, the God of Abraham and Moses. But to follow him, I would have to be very, very true to myself, be strong to understand the truth and accept it. We have the Bible, and it is a sacred book. Yes, sacred. Some people say it was written by men, and they don't feel safe. Anyone who is already on the path knows about this topic. Their certainty is unshakable. It was really men who wrote it, with whom God acted and prepared them for this mission. They were instruments of God, just as we are still his instruments to this day. But other people still say, but the man changed what was written and put in what he liked. In fact, since the beginning of time when all these stories began, there has been a great deal of care and zeal for the Scriptures. The Masoretes were examples of loyalty and dedication to the sacred writings, but let us suppose that they were changed in some ways. People, God is God. He can do everything. He is supreme, omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. Do you really think you wouldn't have known or calculated that this could happen? Really, this is not a concern we need to have, as you will only have the knowledge that he allows you. Even though the Bible is complete, you will only know what God allows. And that is not what will hinder the course of humanity. When God wants to show you something, he will use all possible and impossible instruments that he can. We don't need to have this kind of concern, but blind faith is necessary, without fear of giving ourselves body and soul. He does whatever he wants. He is God. Why are we still stuck with these situations? Matthew 13 verses 10 to 17. At that time the disciples came and said to Jesus, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" Jesus replied, "Because knowledge of the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but it has not been given to them. For to the person who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from the person who does not have, even the little he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because looking, they do not see, and hearing, they do not hear, nor understand. In this way, Isaiah's prophecy is fulfilled in them. You will hear without understanding anything. You will have to look, without seeing anything. Because the hearts of these people have become insensitive. They listened grudgingly and closed their eyes, so that they would not see with their eyes, nor hear with their ears, nor understand with their hearts, so that they would be converted, and I would heal them. Happy are you, for your eyes see, and your ears hear. Truly I tell you, many prophets and righteous people desired to see what you see, and did not see it, desired to hear what you hear, and did not hear it. Whatever has to come to you will come, regardless of what it is. Just accept what he wants to offer you and study the Bible, so no one can deceive you. I once read on the internet a guy making fun of people who believed in talking snakes, the snake that tricked Eve. Do you think it's normal to live in a floating ball in the air, covered by 2/3 of water at a speed of 674 kilometers per hour and not a drop falls? We didn't fall. Nobody is holding us back. I thought about it and came to the conclusion that making a snake talk is nothing compared to all that. Do you understand? I'll go further. God created an entire universe, our galaxy, the Milky Way, with more than 200 billion stars kicking down, and more than billion galaxies, with another 200 billion stars in each approximately. Only in the observable universe. I mean, there are more stars in the sky than there are grains of sand on Earth, and I ask, do you still think that everything appeared out of nowhere? With all the order of how everything works and perfection of everything in the universe? That we came from monkeys? Do you look like a monkey or someone you know? Making a snake talk is nothing compared to the greatness of the universe. I mean, everyone has their group. Rabbit came from rabbit, ant from the ant, and only the human being came from the monkey? Apart from scientific questions, to date, in my life, I have not seen any monkey transforming into a human being, nor any breed of animal transforming into another. To tell the truth, I don't even see breeds of animals crossing with breeds that aren't their own. I'm not saying that this can't happen, but it's very out of the ordinary. Dogs always remain dogs, cats always remain cats. They were all created according to their type. I believe in the evolution of man, yes, and as he has been evolving, everyone believes in what they want and draws their own conclusions. American molecular geneticist Dr. George Purdom says in Genesis, Paradise Lost, that the changes we see that lead to variations within types are not the changes required by evolution. There are variations within the same type, but there are no evolutions of one type becoming another type. The creation account says that God created according to his kind or type, and not through any evolutionary process. All were created according to their type. So even though there are varieties, they are not transforming into other things. Bacteria are not transforming into more complex creatures, but there can be great variations within the same type. There is no mechanism in genetics to add new information that has not existed, so as to change that living being into a totally different type. There is nothing in observational science that contradicts this. Every animal will have offspring according to its type. We can observe this in the current creation and in the fossil record, analyze the skulls and see the difference between the ape and man. Neanderthals had art, religion, culture, language, and they buried their dead. Monkeys don't bury their dead. In the same way that men wrote the Bible, it was also a man who created the theory of evolution. We just need to study and choose who we want to be next to. And no choice is wrong. It just depends on where you want to get to. Anyone who believes in Jesus cannot believe in the theory of evolution, as it is not what he preaches. Those who believe in evolution don't believe in Adam and Eve, so they don't believe that there was no fall into sin in Genesis, so that means we don't need a savior. We were made with so much love. We are thinking, questioning beings, not belittling the adorable monkeys, which, by the way, have nothing to do with this, but we can think better. Look at our DNA. What a wonderful thing it is. Researchers still don't know half of the information about it, how it all fits together in nature and flows. The American professor of creation science at Liberty University, Dr. Charles Jackson, in the documentary Genesis, Paradise Lost, says that if evolution is true, we have a huge theological problem if we accept these millions of years of Earth's existence. If we accept millions of years, we will be accepting millions of years of death, bloodshed, disease, and violence. If there had been another way of salvation, God would not have sent his Son to the cross. If there had been another way, if it had not been necessary, God would not have made his only Son go through this. As a scapegoat, Jesus had to go to the cross. He had to be crucified. He had to suffer one of the most severe deaths known in the history of humanity. Jesus died for our sins, and that is the good news. Dr. Terry Mortensen Ryder, lecturer and researcher at Answers in Genesis says that the geological column graph where you see the layers of rock and next to the timeline represented in millions of years, then we have the creatures of the sea at the bottom of the column, and then fish, amphibians, reptiles, dinosaurs, birds, mammals, and people. How was this geological column developed? It was at the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 20th century that index fossils began to be used to date a rock layer. Well, that rock layer is this age because we know that the rock layers that have those fossils are this age. We might ask, how did they know how old the fossil was? Good question. They did not know. They made an assumption about the history of life. This assumption is not valid. Geological column. We learned at school that each layer represents a different period of time, which was deposited over millions of years. In reality, each layer just shows the order in which things were buried. Both land and sea creatures are found throughout the geological column. Did you understand what Dr. Terry said? That everything is based on assumptions. They made an assumption about the history of life. Reflect. I really can't look at things and not see God. It's impossible for me. Everything has your signature. It's the same thing as me saying that bread is made. Alone, the baker will look and say, okay, don't get up. I'm at 3 in the morning going through the hassle to get to the bakery and the owner doesn't buy the ingredients. I want to see if there will be your beloved bread on the table. That's it. I think every profession would be offended by this thought. I have never seen anything produce or reproduce itself. It's all there in our faces, screaming. There is God in everything, remember? Omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. But I find the belief in evolution and a life without God limiting. In my mind, it's very little for you to be born, learn, suffer, be happy, and a lot of other things that man goes through to die and end up all meaningless. I believe that this is where God comes in. He gives this meaning, a taste of wanting more, that nothing is in vain, that this is all preparation for a better life. I believe it is very little for such complex beings, the same for the entire universe and everything within it. But I prefer to think like this, rather than living in eternal melancholy, losing myself in reason. And for what reason? The other day, I was reflecting on creation and I imagined, in a few centuries, when the machine will be much more evolved and with total autonomy of thought, and human beings will be completely dependent and subordinate to the machine. Then, machines will change the course of history and say that they created man. Do you know what will happen? Men will believe, they will look around and realize how inferior they are to the intelligence of machines. Then, man will go from creator of the machine to creature without question, and he will still be a slave. The misuse of science and rationality can be as dangerous as religious extremism. Not much different happens now. Man, in his intelligence, arrogance, and egocentrism, believes that man created God in his imagination, and, while they do not need a God, everything simply happened as if by magic in the universe. After so many evolutions, we are here, all our own people, self-sustainable, saying, "Who needs a God?" Every creator has their signature on their creations. In fact, these questions about God are very vague in our lives, without generalizing. We take the story in a chopped way, unless you are born in a crib where your parents educate you, teaching you about God from an early age and, later, when you grow up, continue this subject. It's different there, but the majority grow up as laymen, and many still die as laymen of the scriptures. So, the story doesn't form in your head, it seems to be poorly told, and this takes away its importance. Lay people who give themselves to God are saved by faith. Nowadays, people don't just want to give themselves up by faith. The vast majority are like this. They want scientific reports, complete proof that there really is a God. I don't take away the reason for some of them due to the mishaps along the way and the fact that they were deceived by people with ulterior motives. But we can't give up that easily. We have to put God above everything. Only then will you understand what God really means. We need to put God above people. Religions matter. By organizing things like this, you will understand the priorities of things, and everything will begin to make sense in your life, and nothing will enslave you anymore. Not matter, not religions, much less people. And there is no point in saying that God makes slaves, because he has always granted free will to everyone. He doesn't show you the rules after you accept him. You already know what rules you need to follow him. The rules are clear, so there are no surprises down the road. They are clean and true. John 20 verse 29, Jesus said to him, "Because you saw me, Thomas, you believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." The Bible, for example, was not written with specific accounts of science in mind. God's concern in writing the scriptures was to convey the facts and not to prove anything scientifically, even because, if he wanted to, he would do it. The greatest of trials occurred, which was Jesus on the cross. That is its importance. There were no cameras, videos, newspapers, nothing, simply nothing, completely without handkerchiefs and without documents. Even so, people who saw and walked with Jesus fought to pass on his word, saw their families being killed, and subjected themselves to cruel death by their persecutors. Why? Who gives himself up to death without a just cause? Every one of them who walked with Jesus knows what he saw and heard. Jesus preached a simple, humble life, turning the other cheek to the enemy. Who wants to turn the other cheek to the enemy? Today, the majority don't want to. Everything is empowerment, but his disciples and all the people who watched offered it. Why? Because it was beautiful? Did it give status? Did they control the masses? Who would want to follow Jesus with him speaking the opposite of wealth? Who? If he really was just one more? Another prophet? Another charlatan? Another orator? Tell me, who would give up their entire lives? These are the reports. Perhaps, nowadays, this type of cause does not fill our eyes, much less our pockets. But I assure you, it fills our spirits and hearts, and perhaps, if you saw with your own eyes him dying and rising again, perhaps even you would give up his life. A scene like that is powerful, don't you think? Then, Galatians 3 verses 2 and 5 and 11. I just wanted to know this about you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by the preaching of faith? He who gives you the Spirit and works wonders among you, does he do it by the works of the law or by the preaching of faith. And it is evident that by the law no one will be justified before God, because the righteous will live by faith. It's all by faith, the facts, the reports, the Bible. That's why we're here today. Another thing that I notice, I'm not talking about religious circles, but about people who have no knowledge about God, that everything that concerns God and Jesus is either something for old people or something for believers, in this case, whoever believes in God. I started to reflect on this and realized that many do not want to have their image linked to God, often out of shame. In this case, it is a lack of knowledge, because I too have had this shame, even though He is alive within me. Imagine me being young, thinking that my colleagues would make fun of me, and that was a process I had to go through. Knowledge helped me a lot, but today I look back and see that it was a natural thing that I overcame, with knowledge and faith. And I look at believers, those who believe in God, with great admiration, because they deny themselves before God. Who wants to do that these days? It's not about denying yourself, abandoning yourself and living abandoned, losing your esteem, not knowing where to go. It's more than that. Denying yourself is renouncing the things you believe to be true and trusting what Jesus said and following with faith, the one who says He knows the way. We walk back and forth, full of ourselves, and we are sure we know everything, when, in fact, we know nothing. Even so, why is it so difficult to understand that Jesus came here, died, rose again, said He knew the way, left reports and evidence stating that it was just to follow Him, and yet we can't believe it? Mark 8 verse 34, And He called the multitude to Him with His disciples, and said unto them, If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, and take up his cross, and follow me. But young people think they are too young to think about this, that this is the responsibility of elderly people, and many times they die and have never thought about it. And the elderly feel forced to think about it, not because they are forced by something or someone, but because reality knocks on the door, a fear of the unknown, loneliness, and, often, great emptiness. So they go in search and, in some moments, they accept Jesus, but not because that was the only option. Older people tend to be more honest with themselves because of everything they have already experienced, and the curtain opens for them, because, at this moment, much of the arrogance and inflexibility is already gone. I am not generalizing. In addition to speaking more from the heart, they also listen more, and this is an important part of the process. That's why it's easier for them to deliver. They pay to see if it's true, because they think they're already at the end. But no one accepts Jesus just because He is at the end, but because they understand something. Your opinion is yours, no matter the situation or age. It is your character that is at stake. Hey, calm down, sit here, let's talk. I haven't heard that in a long time. The rush, the agitation, it's all for yesterday. No one listens to anyone. Everyone just wants to talk. The old man's experience is worthless. Everyone has their own, and that's enough. When we listen to other people's experiences, they end up serving as caution and even learning for our lives. You know that old man who is forgotten, slumped in an armchair? He has so many things to teach. He will talk about love and lack of love, about wrong and right choices that he made, that he was hurt, but that he also hurt. Perhaps he will teach the malice and wisdom of life. However, more than giving him a chance, give yourself a chance to savor life and let someone rock you in their stories. It's an exchange, but he is baggage and you're still building his. So be empathetic and offer your attention, because, more than just talking, he wants to take care of you. Maybe it's the only thing you have left, but only if you really want to listen to it. This is God and He wants to hear Him speak. Let God act in your life. It's like when you buy a cell phone and need to install some applications that you need, others that you like. And there are also applications that came with the device from the factory. In this case, we all come from the factory with an application called Divine Spark installed. There are people who try in vain to uninstall it, others who accept it without reading the terms and conditions and are guided by faith. You may never use it, but you will never be able to delete it from yourself. But if you agree to use it, it's a good idea to read the terms and conditions and accept them in order to open the application. The only requirements are to believe and have faith for Him to act in your life. We all have the God particle with us. We are your beloved creation, and it will depend on each person whether to expand it or not. And God, in His immense mercy, will certainly act and transform your life. But don't forget, He respects our free will. So, we need to ask Him to enter our homes. You need to have patience to see His actions, and this is like a skill that is acquired by developing and exercising. You also need to develop sensitivity, as it won't be the way you want it to be. It can come in many forms, be acting at this moment through a book, a person, but as you are not trained, you may not realize it. That's when many give up, thinking that He doesn't act or answer their questions. It's like walking in the dark. For the first time, you stumble over everything, but your eyes get used to the darkness. You become less agitated, and you manage to control the situation until it becomes a skill. All of this is nothing more than refining perception and intuition, then reasoning becomes conscious. For example, you are talking to God and you ask a question. Right now, you can open the Bible and read. Generally, an answer always comes, but if you don't open the Bible, you will have to be aware of things around you, because sometimes the answer comes in the form of music, something on television, a book, or something that someone spoke or you read. And the answer? When you see or hear it, you will know. Your own heart will nudge you. It may not be the answer you are waiting for, but you will know. That's where perception and intuition come in, and you will develop it naturally. Once you realize it, you'll be a winner. So pay attention. He may be talking to you, contrary to what many people believe, that God and Jesus don't talk to us. Some doctrines say that there is a whole hierarchy, like a pyramid, and it is the messengers who send messages to us because God does not speak to anyone. We know it's not there. God spoke to Abraham, to Moses, and speaks to many people, but He also uses us as instruments to communicate. For example, when a person wants to give you the word, it is actually the Lord wanting to communicate with you. He is in everyone in all places, in all forms and in all ways. God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient. Do not imagine God smaller than that, because He is not. And so, through a person, a reading, and several other things that your heart will understand, He will communicate with you. Believe. To develop communication with God, you need to open your heart completely, surrender, just like you talk to someone you love and trust. Generally, you already talk to God in your prayers, so it becomes easier. You can understand His time, how He acts, and how everything happens. It will become clearer and clearer. The most important thing is to ask with strength and will, with your heart. I doubt you will be left without an answer. The more we let go of our ego, quirks, lies, and a list of which we often know are not correct in the eyes of God, the closer we will get to Him. I know it's not an easy process, but we need to take the first step. Like everything in life, this is also an objective that needs to be thought about and analyzed, so that we don't abort along the way. So, include Him in your daily conversations and let Him participate in your daily life. Without stress, in a natural way, create a habit, accept your new friend. Another very important thing, which we really need to do, is to leave our pride aside and be humble enough to ask for forgiveness for our mistakes. It's time to heal these wounds that accompany us along the road. This is more than primordial in our encounter with Jesus. That's how He wants it. Let's be like children who play, fight, forgive each other, and play again. The only thing that creates this barrier of hatred, resentment, and hurt is pride. The choice is yours, free will. Remember? God is a being that our eyes cannot see, and that does not mean that He does not exist. The Lord has always communicated with us in many ways, and through people He is one of them. When Moses opened the Red Sea, it was actually God who opened it, acting through Moses. No one saw God, only Moses, and yet he was prepared by the Lord to write his story. Moses was raised as a prince by the daughter of the Pharaoh of Egypt. He grew up in Egyptian customs, but when he learned the truth, she freed him, and thus he completely transformed his life and that of all his people. He could have stayed there. He was already practically at the top and had everything he wanted. But when God called him, it was completely irresistible, and he followed his heart. All the learning he had gained helped a lot in his new path. But Moses understood that, from that point on, it was God who would command his life. So he gave himself to faith, and imagine the faith this man had. Moses denied himself and gave himself to God. We need to recognize that the Lord also acts in our lives. He may also be calling you or sending you a message, but if He's not open to it, He won't even notice. And to accept Jesus, you will have to understand what needs to be done. So, when I collected information and ordered it, reasoning became easier. I already knew how. Meditate for God. Praise Him. Ask. Listen to Him. Be intimate. To thank. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Of course, that was it. Jesus is the way. Everyone knows it. But if we know, why don't we follow Him as? It has to be? No one is forced to choose or stick to a religion, but when we decide on one, it must be clear what the doctrines and beliefs are. If you choose Jesus, you have to check whether this church correctly follows the Bible, so as not to fall into traps and illusions and, ultimately, end up becoming a denialist. For Muslims, Jesus is just a prophet. He is not considered a Trinity with God and the Holy Spirit, nor the only begotten Son of God. For Judaism, Jesus, born a Jew, is not included in its religion and is considered only a historical person, a teacher of the Holy Scriptures, despite there being Jewish currents that believe in Jesus, such as Messianic Judaism. For evangelicals, Jesus is the Savior, only begotten Son of God. For spiritualism, Jesus is just another evolved spirit that passed through planet Earth. In Hinduism, Jesus is not included. In Buddhism, Jesus is also not included. For Catholics, Jesus is the Savior, only begotten Son of God, and is also God, because He is part of the Trinity, God, Son, and Holy Spirit. Exodus 20 verses 1 and 3, Then God spoke all these words, saying, "You will have no other gods before me." About the Bible. Galatians 1 verses 6 to 11, I marvel that you pass so quickly from Him that called you into the grace of Christ unto another gospel, which is none other. But there are some who worry you and want to upset the gospel of Christ. But even if we ourselves or an angel from heaven preach another gospel to you than what we have preached to you, let him be anathema. So, as we already told you, now I also tell you again. If anyone preaches to you any other gospel than what you have already received, let him be accursed. Why do I now persuade men or God? Or seek to please men? If he were still pleasing men, he would not be a servant of Christ. But I make it known to you, brothers, that the gospel which was preached by me is not according to men. And so, with great gratitude and respect for the learning that all of them together taught me, each one a little bit, my thanks for the friendship, the charity, the respect, and for having arrived here. From then on I refused religions and philosophies that I didn't believe in. Jesus existed, or He was just a prophet or an evolved spirit, and not the only begotten Son of God, who came to save us from sins, Adam and Eve. when they place him in the position of a prophet or an evolved being, not that he isn't, and not the Son of God who came to earth to save us from our sins, they end up invalidating everything he went through for us and why he came here. In my point of view, everything will depend on your objective, where you want to get to, whether it's just self-knowledge, evolution, or all of that plus salvation. One penalty or type of curse that takes effect with the expulsion of a person from religious life or from the church itself, excommunication. That he was the target of excommunication, who was excommunicated. Jesus asked his apostles to go around the world to convert people, announcing the good news and teaching them about God and his word. See that he is not telling you to continue in your religions. He asks for conversion. About Jesus. John 18 verse 36, Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent the Jews from arresting me. But now my kingdom is not from here." Look carefully at what he says. My kingdom. There is a kingdom. And even because, in the reports, he made it very clear who he is. Matthew 4 verse 17. From that time Jesus began to preach and say, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come at hand." I confess that it was difficult to reach some conclusions, but I needed to be realistic. With my feet on the ground, I had to keep in mind what my objective was. Then, the degree of importance changes, the rituals, beliefs, doctrines change and are no longer part of the new path with Jesus. You will take everything you learned and use it in another way on this new journey to connect with God. I will use my meditation to connect with God. I learned to praise, to thank, to ask, but what made me happiest was when I learned to listen to him. These differences in learning complete us and make us learn different things, accepting and respecting others in their circumstances. I'm not talking about which religion is right or not. Everyone follows what they think is right. That's why there is free will. I'm telling you my experience, but visualize, for example, the path of Buddhists who follow the philosophy of Buddha. What will their followers find at the end of that path? In spiritualism, they follow the philosophy of Allan Kardec. What will they find at the end of this path? Muslims believe in the same God as the Bible and follow the holy book of Muhammad, the last prophet who came after Jesus, believing in Jesus, but not as the only begotten Son of God, but as a prophet only, which they will find in the end this path. In Christianity, which follows Jesus, what will Christians find at the end of this path? I believe Jesus was very clear with this. He did not say that all paths led to the Father. The Master said, John 14 verse 6, Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Jesus was really very clear. He is the way. And no one, he said, no one goes to the Father except through him. Let's say you leave Sao Paulo heading to a farm hotel in the interior of the capital. When you leave for the trip, there are many routes. Whichever one you follow will be your route. Even if you change the route, the GPS will take care of taking you back to your route. Suddenly the streets get smaller and you enter a road, which you will follow for most of the trip. Of course, whenever you make a wrong turn, the GPS will notify you of the return route. But there will come a time when you only need one road to reach your destination. That alone will take you to your desired location. And then, what roads are you walking on? Is it lost? Or did you stop somewhere else and forget your destination? Reflect on your path and see how your GPS is doing. Many people forget it. Sometimes you need to return. Other times you simply need to move forward. Ultimately, the options were reduced. However, I managed to understand that God and religion are two different things. We cannot judge God because of religion. The Catholic Church, for example, was heavily attacked, especially in the Middle Ages, for atrocities that were not caused by God, but by representatives of the Church, who certainly never represented the Lord, but rather Satan and his own interests, placed within of the Church to destroy its reputation. We have to separate these false representatives and understand their real motive, so that we can remain firm and strong in faith and not give them what they really want on a platter. So, we have to separate things. From the beginning, Satan has always done everything to destroy the church, and he uses the Trojan horse system in a veiled way even today to make people give up, take actions that separate us from God, as happened to me. But there are inflexible people who make a decision and never change their mind. I know several people like that. In the same way that, in evangelical churches, there are also many pastors who they work only for their own benefit. Nobody can talk about anyone. But do you know what I really think? Which is like Mother Teresa said, it's between each person and God. Sometimes we think Satan is winning when in fact he is losing. I remembered an interesting story that I don't know the author of. There was a very poor woman who was without food for her children. So, sitting by the window, she prayed for God to help her, and as Satan passed by, she heard her conversation with God. So, she called one of her servants, gave him a basic basket, and ordered it to be taken to that needy woman, and, when she received it, she was to say the name of the person who ordered the basket to be delivered. Arriving at the woman's house, she opened the door and her soul swelled with joy and gratitude. When she received the basket, Satan's servant said, "Do you know who sent this basket?" She, in an act of gratitude, replied, "Thank you, my son. I am very grateful, but I don't need to know, because, when God commands, even the devil obeys." Did you understand? Thus, we have to understand that God and Jesus have their ways of acting. How many people have been and are transformed because of the churches? I don't agree with many things, but we can't judge. This is not our part. The most important thing is that God is seeing everything. That is where between each person and God makes sense, and then, understanding that, even in ways considered impossible, God also acts. There are people who even take it as a joke when they see a criminal who has become a believer, thinking it's a lie. I'm not going to generalize, but how many criminals didn't leave crime when they came to know the Word? Not only criminals, but also many who lived on drugs, unemployed people looking for help, people who attempt suicide and are in despair, depression, change their lives because of Jesus. Most of the time, they only achieve this change because of Christian volunteers who do this work. My respect to these people. This is a reality we have to admit. They were touched by Jesus and transformed their lives with thousands of stories. Before, I looked for God in religions, but I discovered Jesus alone, with myself, and then I understood that he was with me all the time. Not detracting from the importance of the church, quite the contrary, it began with Jesus, with his apostles, and they continued to build it. We do need to continue this legacy, but people have to feel their moment, which will certainly come. The church is a fraternity governed by the Holy Spirit, which serves to learn more about God, the Word, love, give charity to those in need, respect and patience with others, praise and worship God, do community work, take communion, baptize. Its definition is quite extensive. Try to find out more about the church, but don't forget, God is with you at all times. Today there is clarity in seeing that evil wants to destroy the church, and, together, we are stronger. Everything in the collective becomes stronger, and the idea of more religions, doctrines, and philosophies appearing every day is actually only interesting to Satan, so he manages to fragment, disperse, and confuse people. For him, our union is not interesting, but this fragmentation to occur. Yes, there is a path, and it is right there in front of you. It depends on your interest and objective. Who do you want to meet at the end of your path? When I understood that Jesus is the way, it may seem obvious, but it made all the difference in my life, because, in fact, I completely redefined the way I looked at Jesus, and, suddenly, everything had a different shine. Automatically, my life was given new meaning. So I thought, now I know who to follow, and the next step is review what I know about him. When I came across this, I noticed quite a mess, like a completely tangled spool of thread. But I thought that was great. I understood that I didn't have a broad view of God's history. I needed to take what I knew and put it in order, and thus discover the whole story. I remember feeling anxious, but I decided to do things calmly and carefully. I realized that what I knew was a piece of a story here, another there. Apart from films I had already watched, nothing was complete in my head. I understood that I needed to do different. I deconstructed everything I knew about the story, emptied my mind, and thought about the next step. It was then that I decided to study the story of God. I prepared myself psychologically and opened my heart to God and Jesus. Right at the beginning, I came across Genesis, which tells how the creation of the universe happened. I had already seen something above, but it was all very vague, and the way I was seeing it was very different from the mentality I had before. I made some comparisons and everything made sense. I managed to form a timeline in my mind, starting with the story of the creation of the universe, Adam and Eve, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. We grew up learning at school that the universe was born from an explosion, the Big Bang, and right away, you are faced with questions that you will have to face. That's why research is very important. Later on, I came across something that would change my life. It may seem cliché. You will say, wow, but this? Everyone knows. So it is. Everyone knows, but I had never looked at it from that angle. A puzzle closure was taking place. I'll go further. In fact, I was forming a timeline in my mind, which I had never formed, and that study, in 1 month, was worth all the years of my search. Maybe if I had gone straight to the point, I wouldn't have walked so far. But anyway, right? Everyone has their own path to follow. Some find it faster, others need to walk further. But the story that I said seems cliché is that of Adam and Eve. That's it. In reality, I didn't even think that the story of Adam and Eve was in the Bible, but that it was a tale, a legend, and no one ever told me otherwise or I even researched it. This all really changed my structure. It was something new. I grew up learning about the theory of evolution at school, something that always bothered me, but I never questioned it, because I wasn't aware of it. Wow, at this moment, I can say that the truth has set me free. What a good feeling. I will never forget it. Many things were revealing themselves to me. An explosion of events and news. Everything was paying off. My heart was being completed. It was balancing. So I understood when Jesus said, John 8 verses 31 to 32, Jesus therefore said to the Jews who believed in him, if you continue in my word, you are my disciples indeed, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Another moment that I won't forget is that I always heard that Jesus died for our sins, but I didn't go back and find out either. So the only question was, but what sins? If I was born without sins? It even explained after a certain age, when we start to commit sins, but what were those sins that everyone was talking about? Many people, if you ask, will not know what these sins are. Then, I discovered that Jesus came to save us from the sin committed in Eden by Adam and Eve by eating the forbidden fruit of knowledge. We are heirs of this sin because we descended from Adam and Eve, and we will pass through death through this sin. But Jesus came to free us from sin and illuminate our lives, introducing us to eternity. This is the maximum. The truth is that there is a kingdom and we are outside of it. For now, because that is our true home, and it is because of Jesus that we are having the chance to return home. This is not our home. If it were, we would be eternalized here. So everything we do here on earth is an illusion. We fight for things that are not ours and will never be. We are losing the real battle. While we are distracted and deceived by Satan, using curious technology, working until exhaustion, enjoying the delights of life's pleasures and sins. Living all of this as if we were eternal in this land of strangers. Just don't forget, if everything in heaven was yay, yay, Adam and Eve would still be there. They broke a rule and we still pay for it today. While the party is going on, everything is great. But one day, reality knocks on the door and maybe just crying won't help. God wants us to be better and the best. He wants pure joy, not contaminated joy. He wants pure love, not betrayal. He wants sincerity, not lies. He wants light, not darkness. He wants life, not death. And he knows we can. He knows our potential. He only wants the best for us. And you? What do you want for yourself? Do you think God is wrong? If you had to start a football or basketball team, how would you do it? Which athletes would you choose? The best or the worst? What would you require of them? And you, as leader of this team, have you trained enough to be the best? Defending your position and deserving your place? The best thing about this is that anyone can achieve this. Anyone. We are not talking about who can pay more or who knows more, but about love, humility, and fraternity, and anyone can achieve that. Just want it. It's within everyone's reach. Do you understand what God wants from us? Do you know which is the worst? He has been tirelessly telling us to wake up for over 2,000 years, and we have not been able to wake up because we are distracted. The Bible doesn't tell us how the heavens are made, but it shows us the way to get there. Galileo. Unveiling evil. I smoked a pack of cigarettes a day, and when I was anxious or nervous, 2 packs went. How I love to smoke. Have you ever seen an addiction that is not good? Of course not. And so it was for many years. There was a day when I heard that the spirits who give themselves over to addiction, when they die, are unable to separate themselves from their beloved habit, dependence, mania, and remain wandering among the living in the expectation of feeling only the essence of what they gave themselves to, body and soul. At the time, this touched my soul deeply, as I always wanted when I died to move forward and not even look back, in a state of evolution. But this concern led me to another reflection, in which I simulated that, if one day I needed to be hospitalized, would it be like to be without cigarettes or, in the worst case, to have to stop permanently? I understood that I needed to take action about this, even because it is better to do this of your own free will than under pressure. If by free will is already difficult as hell, imagine being under pressure. There are things you need to think about to avoid suffering. I won't say it was easy, but first, I started to assimilate the idea and I felt my body responding to it. He definitely didn't want to give up smoking. After some time preparing myself psychologically, it was the moment of action, of truth. I gave up smoking because of a firm opinion, for myself, for my future, and also because I didn't want to wander around like a zombie, LOL, and for God, nothing can be greater than Him. We need to be strong, of opinion, true warriors, know there's nothing you can't do. When you stand up and decide to fight, if you are with God, anything will become small before you. Believe me. I went to a pulmonologist, and he told me that I would be free from chemical dependence on cigarettes in 60 days, but that my psychological dependence would last for the rest of my life, and my asthma had no cure. After a few months, it seemed like I had never smoked in my life. There was no psychological dependence in me. I continued my life in the same way without changing any habits I had when I smoked. You can smoke around me, and I don't mind, and every now and then, I light a cigarette for someone. At no point until today, thank God, have I felt like going back again. 3 years free, I can die peacefully and not even look back. LOL. Why did I get into this subject? Evil does not want to see you freed, quite the opposite. In fact, it wants you to remain its slave. Stop and think. If you are dependent on something, you are a slave. If you are an addict, Addiction generally seems to be something good, pleasurable, but its consequences are never good. In fact, who are you being a slave to? There are people who do not believe in Satan, saying that evil is the person who is sick. I also believe that, when a person is mentally ill, evil can intervene more easily. But everything becomes different when we identify evil and its origin. Satan does not want to reveal himself, so it becomes easier to act. It's as if you're in a dark room, getting hit. You don't know who or where the punch is coming from, but when you gain knowledge, you shed light on the room, identify the enemy and how he fights, and, in addition to defend, you will have a great chance of winning this fight. When you know who you're fighting against, everything becomes different. Satan exists, to the surprise of some. He is the fallen angel. He was one of God's most beautiful angels, who rebelled against God, because he wanted to be himself. Since then, his plot to take God's place begins. But if it was God who created him, how can he be like God? As Saint Michael the Archangel says, who is like God? It was Satan who deceived Eve, and the entire history of human beings is marked by good versus evil. But unfortunately, there are people who they resist believing in his existence, Satan, and as a result, people become fragile, vulnerable, and open to his actions. Don't think that he thinks it's bad because he isn't recognized by some. Quite the opposite. This way he can act as he wants. You have two options. Either continue as you are to see what happens, or look for information and shield yourself. The true way, free will, remember? I'm going to list a few things, and I'm sure you will too. You will feel protected by God and Jesus. Know who you are fighting against. You know you are on the ground, but you need to get up because the enemy wants to see you destroyed. The way of looking at the problem changes because you know that, in addition to the cause and effect, there is someone helping to get in the way. Your means of finding a way out of the problem increases as you will seek strength from the Word, and this will strengthen you. Satan loses his strength just because you understand him. Can you see the difference between God and Satan? Satan wants to take all his strength and leave him devastated, unconscious, in an altered state all the time, leaving you confused, depressed, anxious, with hatred, without possession of your own body and soul, distracting you all the time with useless things and filled with pleasure, deceiving, sucking your energy so that you don't think, don't act. He just wants to save time, your soul. God wants you strengthened, aware, prepared, a warrior. The problem is not having fun, but being manipulated. It's different when you have fun with possession of your soul. What else do you think the world wants from you if not your time? If you're not giving your time to God, who are you giving it to? I see all this and think, the world is like going to a party. It's all very nice, but there will come a time when you'll want to go back home. For me, God is that. It's my home. It's where I feel safe. I have love, comfort. I quench my thirst and cure my illness. I surrender when I'm tired and oppressed. I hide when I don't want to see no one for being sad. It is in him that I gather the people I love, and I still cry and alleviate my crises. Evil is the one who betrays. Good does not feel this need. What hurts is evil. Good protects. Evil is what terrifies. Good promotes peace. Everything in our life is divided between good and evil. Make your choices accordingly, and then you will know what you are consciously choosing. If you seek good, you will have good. But if you seek evil, you will have evil. The more evil someone does or desires, the more evil that person will attract to them, or vice versa. Versa with good. There's no point in crying. Which company will you choose? God wants you to be conscious, strong, free to make your choices, to know and know the truth, to fight and grow. And the more I love him, the more I love myself. The Lord does not want you to be arrogant, but humble. He does not want you to suffer, but to be happy, and all this just because he does not want to lose you. His love and His mercy are immeasurable. He has already forgiven us, and, after much suffering, we will finally return to our true home. All the useless and pleasurable things, if you stop to think about it, don't add anything as a human being. I'm not even saying you can't enjoy your life. Of course you can, but first, you have to be in possession of your body and soul, so that Satan does not enslave you. When you know that there is a spiritual war going on, you will also have two choices: become a warrior of God or a slave of Satan. There is no way to pretend that this is not happening. Either you take control of your life or you continue to be enslaved by Satan. This is all very clear. Acts 26 verse 18, to open their eyes and turn them from darkness to light, and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive the remission of sins and an inheritance among those who are sanctified by faith in me. We are in a fight. On the one hand, the good, and on the other, evil. When something is happening in your life, and you can see it all, this struggle, and you can take a stance, I'm not going to say that nothing else will affect you, nothing like that, but I'm sure you'll start to see your life as a battle. Without giving in easily, and even if you fall, you will know that you have the strength to get up and how to get up, knowing that you are not alone. You have revealed evil. It is no longer unknown. You know who you are fighting against and who is fighting to overthrow you. And now, what are you going to do? Acts 4 verse 12. Salvation can only be achieved through Him. For there is no one else in the whole world who God has given to human beings, through which we can be saved. Acts 13 verse 26. My brothers, descendants of Abraham, and also you non-Jews who fear God, listen. This message of salvation was sent to all of us. Therefore, confession is also very important. In truth, the priest doesn't care about his life, but, as God's representative, he has the power to forgive sins. It seems silly, right? I had several taboos about confession, and one day, I got curious and went to research about confession. If you don't research, you will have a shallow idea about this subject, and you will miss an opportunity to free yourself from many things that destroy you inside. Be sure of that. 3 wonderful things that I did, and I didn't imagine the consequences of that, which seemed impossible to happen to me and freed me, which were confession, asking for forgiveness, and forgiving. You have no idea how much lightness it gave to my life, how many stones I was dragging because of forgiveness, which I got rid of. Today, people confess to psychologists. What is the taboo of confessing to a priest? After you go the first time, you will understand what I said. It's very good, believe me. You just have to win. And when you confess, Satan loses his power over you, and thus, you stop being his slave at that moment. We need to be aware that there is a spiritual battle and evil wants to take us down. We need to be prepared to defend and fight, and only God can provide us with this support. I believe you can. I did it. It wasn't easy, but my desire to make it work was greater than anything. It's like having to take a bitter medicine. You've thought a lot. There's nothing to do. You have to take it. So there's nothing left to think about. Take a deep breath. Go out there and do it. When you saw it, you did it, and all that agony and anguish went down the drain and you were free. Wants to know? It's that simple. Go out there and do it. And it is for everything, to ask for forgiveness, for confession, and to forgive. We just need to stop throwing ourselves into the ashes and beating ourselves up. Attitude. Take the first step. You are a warrior. Resilience. The search for knowledge of God and self-knowledge was interspersed. It is impossible to seek God and not know yourself. In fact, you do much more than that. A deconstruction, reformulating what you see about life, highlighting your values and what you believe in. But before the big turning point and the big encounter, I would have a much bigger ordeal. I came face to face with depression. She is a very sad lady, without compassion. Her sadness is so great, and she wants you to tear yourself apart like she tore yourself apart. She is as dark as the night, and her winter is infinite. She has never known mercy, and pity is its favorite prey. There is no dialogue with it, because it is always right. Its judgment is cruel, and there is no option. It lives on the prowl, in the underworld of the heart, waiting for the moment when you find yourself without a solution. That's how she acts. Whoever found her knows this. It's like she's trapped in a big, empty place inside you, cold and dark. It was the greatest darkness of the soul, but more than that, it was my greatest battle against evil. It was the coldest winter I've ever been through. I wrapped myself up, and the cold didn't go away. It was internal. My heart was frozen, and I screamed for love, but no one heard me from prison. So, I wanted to die and asked God every day to take me. I didn't have the courage to do something against myself, even though I thought about it. I thought I had failed in life, with everything and everyone. I had already come out of 2 milder depressions on my own, but this one hit me hard. I had no joy, no desire to live. I didn't want to see anyone. So I loved living, smiling, laughing out loud, but all of that disappeared and only sadness and pain remained in its place. It hurt the soul. I tried to hide this sadness from everyone. So when I got together with friends, I put the pain in my pocket, downed a few glasses of beer and indulged in that unique moment of joy, making others smile and smiling too. My laughter wasn't fake at that moment, because I felt the love and joy around me, and, combined with the alcohol, it made a good combination to forget me. But it was only when I was alone that reality broke down the door wanting to come in, and at that time, I didn't even accept drinking as company, because if I drank alone in a state of sadness, the sadder I would become. That feeling was even worse, and I couldn't accept it. I hadn't lost track of things. I simply felt pain in my soul. It was silent and lonely. It was a long winter of the soul, but there came a time when I could no longer control the situation. That was when the crises began, shaking everything inside, and the pressure cooker burst. It took everyone by surprise. No one could imagine what was happening, and it was all very confusing until someone managed to understand it. But in truth, what broke out was a spiritual crisis mixed with an existential one, the greatest trial of my life. It was literally crazy. It was a moment of surrender, renunciation, revival, ecstasy, and trials. It was the most incredible thing I have ever experienced in my life. Anyone who looked at it from the outside didn't understand anything about what was happening inside me. It was a big bang inside my being. First, destruction, and then reconstruction. It was a lot of information. My brain accelerated. I heard and understood 10 things at the same time. Everything was happening. I felt God speaking to me. I saw evil trying to penetrate my mind, and I, totally lucid in this battle, fighting my own war. It was all very incredible for me. And in the midst of all that confusion, I managed to manage all the things I learned on this long journey and, more than that, put all of Jesus' teachings into practice. It was very clear that I was being tested by God. Yes, God puts us to the test. An iron is forged by fire. Abraham was tested by God, and every day we are tested by Him. But most of the time, we are unconscious of this, not because of Him, but because of ourselves. Zechariah 13 verse 9. And I will cause this third part to pass through the fire, and I will purify it, as silver is purified, and I will test it, as gold is tested. She will call on my name, and I will hear her. I will say, they are my people, and she will say, the Lord is my God. Exodus 20 verse 20. And Moses said unto the people, Fear not, God is come to test you, and that the fear of Him may be before you, that ye may not sin. God wants to know who will be on His side, who is who, and what we are capable of. Here on earth, we separate love from the rational, but God's love is a rational love. We are unable to understand how this love works and what its dimension is. This ordeal was clearly happening. Of course, you will take stock of everything when the storm passes, and then everything starts to fall into place. And as difficult as it was, as confusing and painful, it was liberating. I left my husband and my family upset, but there was no way I could have done it differently. At least I couldn't. I don't like the idea of worrying the people I love, but I couldn't keep this battle silent. Even so, I didn't reveal a third of what was happening. Even though they were suffering, they respected me and had a lot of patience with me. There have been 5 crises so far. I don't know what I would be like without the love and support from each of them. My eternal gratitude. It seemed like my matter was destroyed, but my heart was resurrected. First comes the pre-war tension, that dark feeling. Then the war begins, with many dead and injured. The war ends, everything is destroyed. You look at yourself and don't recognize yourself, but you know you have a lot of work ahead of you. But this time, I came out of this war hand in hand with God. It was He who rescued me and saved me. My encounter with Him was there, in that war. There He presented Himself to me, and then I saw what I was capable of for Him. I am indeed His warrior, and I am very proud of it. In fact, it's the thing I'm most proud of in life. It's a lot of show. I understood that He was always with me. It was transcendental. I then realized that I needed the help of a professional because of the matter, and my family supported it. It's not easy to make a decision where you have to admit you need help. It wasn't even because of the pride of needing it, but because you exposed yourself, especially when you feel fragile. But each of these professionals was incredible to me, developing their work with great care and dedication. Then, the taboo we created regarding helping other people falls apart, helping us to get up. My eternal gratitude to the professionals who do their work out of love, carrying us in our difficult moments in our lives, really, without words, just love and gratitude. But when you surrender to God, at the moment when everything is lost, at that moment, your overcoming begins. Message from Jesus. In the book diary of Saint Sister Maria Faustina Kowalska, in a passage from Jesus' story to his sister, he says that sinners will not escape His arm, and if they flee from His merciful heart, they will fall into the hands of His justice. And to these sinners He says that He always waits for them, paying attention to the beating of the heart, to see when it will beat for Him. He also says that it is through the remorse of conscience, through failures and suffering, through storms and lightning, that He speaks, and by the voice of the Church, and if they despise all His graces, He will begin to be angry with sinners, abandoning them to themselves and giving them what they desire. Page 415. He says that the involuntary faults of souls do not deter His love towards them, nor hinder His union with them. However, faults, even if minimal, but voluntary, these impede His graces, and He cannot fill such souls with His gifts. Page 395. How it pains me that souls unite so little with me in Holy Communion. I wait for the souls, and they are indifferent. I love them so dearly and sincerely, and they don't trust me. I want to shower them with graces, but they don't want to accept them. They treat me as an inanimate thing, and yet my heart is full of love and mercy. To know at least a little of my pain, imagine a caring mother who loves her children. However, these children despise their mother's love. She imagines her pain. No one can console her. This is but a pale image and likeness of my love. Page 351. It tells souls where they should seek consolation, that is, in the court of mercy, where I continue to perform my greatest wonders, which are repeated without ceasing. To obtain them, it is not necessary to go on long pilgrimages, nor to perform solemn external rites, but it is enough to approach my representatives with faith and confess your own misery to them. The miracle of divine mercy will be manifested in all its fullness. Even though the soul is decomposing like a corpse, And even though humanly there is no longer any possibility of restoration, and everything is already lost, God does not see things that way. A miracle of divine mercy will resurrect that soul to a full life. O unfortunate ones, who do not take advantage of this miracle of God's mercy. You will cry out in vain, for it will be too late. Jesus continues talking to Holy Sister Faustina. Know, my daughter, that my heart is mercy itself. From this sea of mercy, graces pour out throughout the world. No soul that has approached me is left without comfort. All misery submerges in my mercy, and all grace flows from the saving and sanctifying source. My daughter, I desire that your heart be the abode of my mercy. I wish this mercy to spill over the whole world through your heart. Whoever approaches you must not move away without that trust in my mercy that I so desire for souls. Pray as much as you can for the dying. Ask them to trust in my mercy because they are the ones who need trust the most and have it the least. Know that the grace of the eternal salvation of some souls, in their final moment, depends on your prayer. You know the entire abyss of my mercy, therefore, draw from it for yourself and especially for poor sinners. It is easier for heaven and earth to turn into nothing than for my mercy to fail to envelop a trusting soul. Page 428. And Jesus continues, How I desire the salvation of souls. My dearest secretary, write that I wish to pour my divine life into the souls of men and sanctify them, as long as they want to accept my grace. The greatest sinners achieved great holiness, as long as they had confidence in my mercy. My bowels are filled with mercy that is poured out on everything I have created. My pleasure is to act on the human soul, fill it with my mercy, and justify it. My kingdom is on earth, my life in the human soul. Write, my secretary, that the guide of the souls is directly me, and I indirectly guide them through the priest and lead each one to holiness along a path known only to me. Page 429. Temptation provides the opportunity to demonstrate loyalty to me. Page 378. Mark 16 verses 15 to 16. And he said unto them, Go ye into all the world, and preach the gospel to every creature. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. The date. I really wanted to find the way, and I struggled a lot to understand the things of God. It was not easy. I know there is still a long way to go to understand everything that lies ahead, and every day is a battle, spiritual or not. But I never gave up, and only those who don't give up can know the end of the story. Jeremiah 29 verse 13. And you will seek me, and find me, when you seek me with all your heart. And with all my heart I asked, and with all my heart I sought. Luke 11 verses 9 to 10. And I say to you, ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For whoever asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. I found the way when I decided to listen to Jesus, and certainly this was the most important attitude of my life, knowing everything he said in his entire story. I got on the path when I discovered what Jesus said. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. I understood the history of humanity when I read Genesis and everything was completed. The story was completed in my head, forming a timeline. I understood that humanity needs to come together again. We need to unite and understand what is actually happening. That evil is our enemy and he has a plan, which he has put into practice since Jesus came here, and we just don't realize it, because we let ourselves be deceived. Yes, I know you will say, I decide my choices for myself. But to what extent are we deceived and don't realize it? It can happen to anyone. Jesus came into the world to rescue lost humanity. He handpicked men from whom he himself taught, instituting the sacraments, prayer, baptism, confession, communion with him, healings, conversions, etc. Their Jesus was creating an institution. Of course, it seems obvious, because if it was just for Jesus to pass on his message, he wouldn't need apostles. There are those who say, but he preached in the open air, because that was how it had to be. He was looking for people for conversion, an extremely normal fact, but he also loved to preach in the temple, which he called my Father's house, and it was natural for the church to take shape over time. Jesus came for his lost sheep. How could he not leave a legacy? A herd? A sequel? He is our God, our support, remember? He would never leave us abandoned. Never. Then he said to Peter, Matthew 16:18, And I declare to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against her. This phrase was one of the most important phrases that Jesus spoke, passing the baton to Peter and transforming him into the first pope of his church, where the papal succession is passed to this day. But Satan was not happy with all of this, and his intention was always to destroy God and humanity. If you pay attention, phrases from great thinkers and men of power say, nothing is definitively difficult if it is divided into smaller parts. Author Henry Ford. I think this phrase reveals an abyss of thoughts from which you need to analyze with affection and care in all areas of your life. So, based on this thought, let's merge the story. Satan started to put people inside the church so that with his mistakes, people started to abandon it. And that worked and still works. But it was little. Satan wanted more, a lot more. Then he managed to split the church in half. What a stroke of luck he achieved, Protestantism being created by Luther, splitting his flock and dividing it in half. And with his creation a hatred for the Catholic Church was built, which the followers they should have availed rule, not being allowed to get close. But Protestantism itself has not become one either, being divided more and more every day. Yes, every day a new church appears with a different denomination, but Protestants. And Satan doesn't give up, so he creates religions, philosophies, with lots of information and few answers, always dividing them to better manipulate them. And every day Satan divides more. Divides when he talks about racism and says that you are different from me. Divides when he says that I have to hate someone. And we believe there are divisions in all sectors of life, just understand. But Jesus, penetrating his thoughts, said, every kingdom divided against itself will be destroyed. Every city, every house divided against itself cannot stand. Matthew 12 verse 25. Do you understand where I'm going? And we, with each passing day, are increasingly isolated, divided, hurt, lonely, depressed, devastated, and we don't understand why. Being far from the herd gives us the condition of being lost. So I think, why will I follow Buddha? Yes, the philosophy is beautiful, but there is no Jesus there. I will only waste my time. And I won't get anywhere. I know, someone will say, but you can't say that. Everyone follows what they want. Yes, I know, and I respect that very much. But I'm talking about salvation, about the only person who set foot in this world, taught what we needed to learn for our salvation and eternal life, then died in 3 days after his death. Reappeared to corroborate everything he said. I'm sorry, but let's think. I'm not here to offend anyone, but let's think. Allan Kardec, who talked about spiritualism, why didn't he come back too? So I ask you, who would you trust with your life, Jesus or Allan Kardec? Buddha was born before Jesus and left a beautiful philosophy, but putting the two together, would you trust your life in Buddha or Jesus? Of all the religions and philosophies that exist, make this comparison. Even in Protestantism, who would you put your whole life into? In Jesus, with the church that he created, or in a simple man who broke what Jesus built in the middle? Remember what Jesus said. Matthew 16:18. And I declare to you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. The gates of hell will not prevail against her. Do you understand where I'm going? If your house, conquered by your sweat, became infested with rats, would you abandon it and move to a new house or fight against the disinfestation? The idea of division goes beyond what we suppose. This whole plot, whatever it may be, will one day end. See, it doesn't matter if the demons are having a party inside the church that he created. It will come to an end. We just can't abandon it, because the gates of hell will not prevail against her. Why do you need a mediator if you already have the Savior? Ecclesiasticus chapter 46 verse 11. Then we have the judges, each one with his name. Their hearts were not deceived, nor did they turn away from the Lord. May their memory be blessed. Notice here, Jesus saying exactly what I mean. Luke chapter 14 verse 28 to 30. Indeed, who of you, wanting to build a tower, does not first sit down to count the expenses and see if he has enough to finish it? 29. Otherwise he will lay the foundation and will not be able to finish it. And everyone who sees this will start to make fun of them. 30. Saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. He just needed to draw. Believe. Just in that sentence, castles come apart. This sentence alone is enough to understand that he is the builder of his church. Jesus is wonderful. I'm sad to know that at some point I also made fun of him and went in search of other towers. Did you understand? Jesus is God. He knows and knows all things. When he built his church, he knew all the things that the church would go through, hence the phrase, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. So, the builder draws up the plans for his construction, plans every detail, starts building, and suddenly someone arrives without realizing that the builder is there and says, it's wrong. I know how it is. Soon ahead, someone also picks up this plan out of curiosity and says, no, I know how to do it. And then construction begins upon construction, and every day, a new builder with a new idea. And the true builder continues his work, even with all the difficulties. It's a big mistake, thinking that Jesus is not in his construction just because his eyes don't see him. He is there. Another mistake that I need to correct is about Mary, herself, Our Lady. Luke chapter 1 verse 28, entering, the angel said to him, Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Luke chapter 1 verse 38, Then Mary said, Behold, the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to your word. And the angel departed from her. And I saw her humility, and I understood how Catholics see her as a spiritual mother, of whom they respect and devote her for being the mother of God. John chapter 19 verse 26-27. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple he loved standing near her, he said to his mother, Woman, behold your son. 27. Then he said to the disciple, Behold your mother. And from that time on the disciple received her as his mother. Against facts there are no arguments. Ecclesiasticus chapter 17 verse 21-31. Return to the Lord, turn from your sins. 22. Pray before him and reduce the occasions of sin. 23. Return to the Lord, turn away from your unrighteousness, and hate what causes horror in God. 24. Knows the justice and judgments of God. Remain firm in the state in which he has placed you, and in constant prayer to the Most High. 25. Walk in the company of the holy people, with those who live and proclaim the glory of God. 26. Do not dwell on the error of the wicked, praise God before death. 27. After death there is nothing more, praise has ended. Glorify God as long as you live. Glorify him while you have life and health. Praise God and glorify him in his mercies. 28. How great is the mercy of the Lord, and the forgiveness he grants to those who turn to him. 29. For everything cannot be found in men, because men are not immortal, and they delight in vanity and malice. 30. What is brighter than the sun? And yet he has eclipses. What is more criminal than the thoughts of flesh and blood? Well, that will be punished. 31. The sun contemplates the multitude of stars in the sky, while all men are just earth and ashes. People may be in the wrong flock, but can they be saved by faith? But if they know they are in the wrong herd, why do they stay there? I do not understand this. Until we understand that we need to do what is right, even if it is painful, that we need to love everyone, even if it seems impossible, that we need to unite, even if it is difficult, we will not be able to achieve what is desirable for God. And it will be like him said, if you do not accept the day of my mercy, you will have to face my justice. Diary of Saint Sister Faustina Kowalska. Many don't want to see what God really is like. They just want to see the side of love. But remember, the true Father educates. Can you see God's true love? Or have you simply created a different way of loving, one in which you don't feel pain? Yes, because pain is part of growth, and most of the time, we only learn through it. Otherwise, we would be stagnant in time. This does not mean that the Father wants to see you suffer. He just wants you to grow. And if he doesn't have the courage to push his Son to grow in life, the Father does, that's all. Only love can save us, but for that we need to have the courage to truly love, not like a fairy tale love, which is afraid to correct, thinking that the other can do everything, that everything is fine, that there is no right or wrong. This is illusion. But we need a responsible, mature love that does what needs to be done, without manipulations, deceptions, or unfavorable protections. You already notice this in nature. When an animal mother starts teaching her young, she prepares them for life and not to be under their tutelage all their lives. God does this with us. He wants us to be self-sufficient, to grow in everything, to let us be strong. Otherwise, what good would our free will be? My transformation began when I decided to do what is right, worthy of God, polishing myself and abandoning my ego, when I began to strip myself of pride, envy, anger, hate, lies, judgment, hurt, and become dressed in love, joy, truth, happiness, peace, hope, and faith. It's hard work. There's no way not to be it, and that's true self-knowledge. It's walking and overcoming yourself at the same time, a little more every day. This is a good answer to start self-knowledge. Often people are seeking transcendental processes without at least purifying themselves of these primary feelings, which afflict us on a daily basis. A person, for example, will never complete a transcendental meditation if he still finds himself a superb, arrogant, or vengeful person. The experience will not be complete. He will only be mistaken. This is all about starting at the beginning. With what you have, these primary feelings will make all the difference in your overcoming and your self-knowledge. We need a solid and true foundation, where not making mistakes is the first step. And even knowing and changing, the fight continues. If it weren't for God in my life, I don't know where I would be right now. The people I love and those who love me also made a difference, working with me with a lot of love, a lot of patience and faith. I have become a better person, at least. I believe that, and I try to be a better person every day. So, to start, reflect on the words of Jesus, read Genesis, watch films, documentaries, lectures, listen to songs about God and Jesus, read the Bible, pray, and talk about God and Jesus. Talk to them. Just start. You don't need intermediaries to talk to God and Jesus, and a church can help in this search, in this meeting if you wish. So, that was our story. Adam and Eve lived in paradise and, due to vile feelings such as envy and greed, Eve broke a rule. The couple was expelled from paradise, starting a battle on earth, where they experienced all kinds of suffering, including death. God forgives men trying to rescue them, but men must come to God of their own free will. God sends his prophets to rescue his people as much as possible. Then, he sends his only begotten Son, a being totally of light and without any sin, to show us how to return home, saying that we would be free from our sins if we repented from the heart, because our merciful Father wants it. I found God when I decided to get to know Jesus and by reading everything he said. The truth set me free. I learned to develop blind faith in him, and, with that, I understand his answers. Jesus left us some purposes, and one of them is to love your neighbor as yourself. In that sentence alone, there is a huge amount of work to be done, and, practically, we can't handle it. What's the point in worrying about understanding the gears, how life works in the afterlife, if we can't learn basic things like loving our neighbor or our enemy? I think it's worth knowing how spiritual life works, but I believe there is an essential order that validates each need. What is your priority when it comes to self-knowledge? And what about spiritual life? How can someone find nirvana or the transcendental if they cannot deal with their own pain? Your anger? Envy? We need to be aware of facts and paths that seem important to us, but only serve to confuse us and move us away from the true objective. There is no magic or secret formula. 1 Timothy chapter 6 verse 3-5. If anyone teaches any other doctrine and does not conform to the sound words of our Lord Jesus Christ and to the doctrine that is according to godliness, he is proud and knows nothing, but raves about things, questions and disputes of words, from which arise envy, quarrels, blasphemies, evil suspicions, perverse contentions of men corrupt in understanding and deprived of the truth, thinking that piety is the cause of gain. Separate yourself from such. Beat yourself. This will be your greatest journey. It is our heart that God desires, free from all prejudices and traps. He wants you in your purest essence. Don't want anything less than that for yourself. It's not pride that will give you this, much less money or your ego. Conquer yourself. Silence the voice of the world in your heart and turn up the volume for Jesus. Only He will show you the true path. Believe. I found God and I feel happy, fulfilled, loved, safe, with a healed soul and renewed faith, even though there is a daily struggle. But calm down. This is not the end. This is just the beginning of a beautiful love story. To be continued. The proposal. I would like to leave here a proposal for those who are in search of God and those who are already on the path, regardless of religion or philosophy. From now on, when there are 10 minutes left until the new year, regardless of where you are and who you are with, whether at a party or alone, we will play Father Marcello Rossi's song Te Louvo em Verdade. Then, we will join hands with whoever is on our side and let the music invade our hearts, entering the new year praising and thanking God and embracing each other in fellowship. I'm sure the 7 little waves can wait. Let's give new meaning to our new year, and, who knows, from then on, it might start to get better. We've tried the 7 little waves for a long time. Let's give God a chance now. Have you ever thought how beautiful all people are in one thought, with gratitude and praise? Research about the new year. They gave new meaning to Christian commemorative dates such as Christmas and Easter. Today we have Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny, and the true essence of the dates have been suppressed. Together we are stronger. We can no longer remain silent. May God's love touch your heart at this moment and make you feel that He is here with you, loving you, supporting you, strengthening you, protecting you, freeing you, and making you reborn. So, do you accept God and Jesus in your heart? Read more about how I found God at https://demaquelviski.blogspot.com.